The first time the Alpha King saw the monster, it was chained beneath the royal court, with silver hooks buried through its shoulders and a muzzle forged from moonsteel locked around its jaws. The nobles stood above it in their black velvet and winter furs, whispering prayers to the old moon, as if prayer could make cruelty look holy. Blood steamed on the stone floor. Torches hissed against the cold, and in the center of the hall, beneath the banners of the crown of ash, the beast trembled, as though it understood every word spoken against it. "There it is," Lord Vere of the Royal Council declared, lifting his jeweled hand toward the creature. "The forest butcher. The curse that has devoured our villages, the thing your king swore to kill." The court roared for execution. Wolves snarled from the balconies. Steel rang as guards drew their blades. But Alpha King Kael Draven did not move. He stood at the foot of his throne, one hand resting on the hilt of his black sword, his golden eyes fixed on the monster's face. The beast was enormous, half wolf and half nightmare, its fur dark as burned pine, its ribs heaving beneath scarred hide. Its claws had gouged lines into the stone. Its eyes glowed with a sickly silver light, wild and hungry, full of something ancient that should never have been born. Yet when Kael stepped closer, the monster stopped growling. The hall fell silent. The beast looked at him, and for one impossible breath, its eyes changed. Not fully, not enough for the court to see, but enough for Kael. Beneath the silver glow, beneath the curse, beneath the shape of a thing everyone feared, he saw terror, human terror, a girl's terror. Then the eastern windows burned gold with sunrise, and the monster began to scream. The scream tore through the court, like a blade dragged across bone. Nobles stumbled backward. Wolves flattened their ears. The chain snapped tight as the beast convulsed, its spine bending, claws scraping, black fur receding in violent shudders, as if the moon itself were being ripped from its body. Kael took one step forward, before he knew he had moved. "Hold your ground," Lord Vere barked, though his own face had gone pale. "Do not let it loose." The guards pulled harder on the chains, and the silver burned through flesh. Smoke rose. The beast collapsed, shaking so violently that the floor trembled beneath it. Its jaws shrank beneath the muzzle. Its claws curled into bloodied fingers. Its fur melted into long black hair tangled with leaves, mud, and frost. By the time the first full line of sunlight crossed the stone, the monster was gone. In its place lay a young woman, naked beneath the torn remains of the curse, her wrists bound, her shoulders bleeding, her body curled around itself as if she had learned long ago that the world only touched her to hurt her. The court did not gasp with pity. It recoiled with disgust. "Witch," someone whispered. "Moon. Cursed. Kill her before nightfall." Kael's hand tightened around his sword. The girl lifted her face from the stone. She could not have been more than 20. Her skin was bruised by old restraints, her lips split, her throat ringed with scars where collars had been locked too tightly for too many years. On the left side of her chest, just below the collarbone, a mark pulsed faintly beneath the blood. A crescent moon cracked down the center, black instead of silver. Forbidden, ancient, alive. Her eyes found Kael's. For the one heartbeat, he felt his dying wolf rise inside him for the first time in months. Not with rage, not with hunger, with recognition. Then the girl whispered, so softly, only an alpha could hear. "Please, don't let them give it back to me." No one in the kingdom of Ashbourne spoke her true name anymore. In the villages along the cursed forest, they called her the Hollow Beast, the Night Eater, the Moon's Mistake. In the royal records, she was listed as a dead child from a burned settlement near the northern border, one of many swallowed by the forest 15 winters before. But before the curse, before the chains, before full moons turned her bones into a prison for the kingdom's darkness, her name had been Alara Wren. Her mother had whispered it like a blessing. Her father had carved it into a wooden charm and tied it above her cradle. Ilara, bright one, beloved one. But beloved things did not survive long in Ashbourne. Not when the old moon temple needed a vessel. Not when the royal council needed somewhere to bury the sins of a kingdom. Ilara remembered little of the night she was taken, only fragments that returned whenever moonlight touched water. Her mother's hand slipping from hers, the smell of smoke, the sound of wolves, howling not in hunger, but in warning. She remembered men in white masks carrying lanterns made of bone. She remembered a priestess pressing 2 fingers to her chest and saying, "This one is empty enough to hold it." Then pain, then darkness, then waking beneath the old temple with the crescent burned into her skin, and a voice telling her that she had been chosen to serve the kingdom. Chosen was the word powerful people used when they meant stolen. For years, Ilara had lived between 2 forms. By day, she was kept in a stone cell beneath the abandoned moon temple, fed scraps, washed with freezing water, and visited only by healers who never met her eyes. By night, when the full moon rose, the curse opened inside her like a second mouth. Darkness poured into her body from every corner of Ashbourne. Plague, rage, bloodlust, treachery, grief, madness, all the rot that should have festered in kings and councils and noble houses. She absorbed it because the mark forced her to. She carried it because no one else wanted to. And when the darkness became too much, it shaped her into the beast. The council told the kingdom the monster came from the forest. They told villagers to lock their doors, burn silver at their thresholds, and pray the Alpha King's army would protect them. What they did not say was that every full moon, royal riders drove criminals, rebels, inconvenient witnesses, and cursed offerings into the trees, then released Ilara after them. When she woke at sunrise covered in blood she did not remember spilling, the priestess would kneel beside her and whisper, "You saved the kingdom another month." Ilara had stopped asking what kind of kingdom survived by feeding a girl its sins. Her wound was not that people hated her. Hatred, at least, looked you in the eye. Her wound was worse. She had been made necessary and then despised for surviving what others placed inside her. She was the secret the kingdom needed, and the monster it blamed. No one rejected her at a mating ceremony. No lover cast her aside before a cheering pack. Her humiliation was older, quieter, sharper. Every month, the court condemned the beast in public, while secretly sending guards to ensure Ilara remained alive enough to suffer again. Until the winter, the villages began dying without orders. The first slaughter happened in Bracken Hollow, a logging village at the edge of the cursed forest. 27 bodies were found beneath pine trees, torn apart under a moonless sky. That alone proved something was wrong. Ilara only changed beneath a full moon, but the council announced the beast had grown stronger. Fear spread faster than snowmelt. The second slaughter came 3 nights later, then a third. Each time, survivors swore they saw a black wolf larger than a horse, moving between the trees. Each time, silver symbols were carved into the doors afterward. Old temple marks Ilara recognized from her nightmares. By the time word reached the capital, Alpha King Kael Draven had already been fighting a war inside his own blood. He had inherited the crown of ash after his father died in a border rebellion, leaving him a throne made of bone, debt, and old lies. Kael was feared across the northern packs, not because he was cruel without reason, but because he had learned early that mercy shown in the wrong room could become a knife in the back of every loyal soldier. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and battle-scarred, with black hair usually tied at the nape of his neck, and eyes the color of a wolf's gaze caught in firelight. Men lowered their voices when he entered. Alphas bowed even when they hated him. His command could silence a hall before a blade was drawn. But beneath his power, his wolf was dying. It had begun as a faint distance between man and beast, a hesitation before shifting, a dull ache beneath his ribs when the moon rose. Then came the dreams, a throne rejecting him, roots of black ash wrapping around his bones, a faceless girl crying in a forest while his wolf clawed at his chest to reach her. The royal healers called it blood fatigue. The old priestess called it divine judgment. Lord Vare called it nothing at all. because naming a king's weakness was dangerous unless one intended to use it. Kale had hidden the truth from the court. He still rode at the head of armies, still presided over trials, still punished treason, but each month his wolf retreated deeper, as though something in the kingdom itself was poisoning the bond between crown and blood. If the packs learned the Alpha King could no longer fully shift, rival alphas would descend like vultures. If the council learned how bad it had become, they would begin choosing his replacement before his body cooled. So when Lord Vare entered the war chamber with reports of the forest monster, Kale welcomed the hunt. A beast could be tracked. A beast could be killed. A beast did not whisper from inside his blood that the throne beneath him was built on a buried girl's suffering. The villages demand justice, Vare said, spreading blood-stained maps across the table. He was a thin man with silver hair, pale eyes, and the soft hands of someone who ordered death but never carried it. They say the crown has allowed the monster to feed for too long. Kyle looked at the marks on the map. 3 villages, 3 attacks, too close together, too deliberate. Monsters do not carve temple symbols into doors. Vare's expression did not change. Fear makes peasants see patterns, and councils hide behind them. A faint silence moved through the room. The commanders lowered their eyes. Vare smiled, as if amused. Then hunt it yourself, your majesty. Bring its head back to the capital. Let the people see that their king still protects them. Still. The word landed softly, but Kale heard the blade beneath it. Still protects them. Still commands. Still has a wolf worth fearing. That night, Kale rode into the cursed forest with 12 of his best hunters, 3 royal trackers, and Lord Vare's nephew, Captain Soren, who claimed he was there to represent the council. Soren was handsome in the polished way of men who admired themselves in sword blades. He spoke often of loyalty, and watched Kale too closely when the moon rose. The forest swallowed them before midnight. Ancient pines stood like black pillars beneath the winter sky. Snow clung to the branches, but beneath the trees the ground was strangely warm, steaming in places where dark roots broke through the frost. No birds called. No insects stirred. Even the horses resisted until Kale dismounted and walked ahead on foot. His wolf should have risen eagerly in such a place, scenting danger, reading the night. Instead it lay weak and restless inside him, ears pinned back, its breath shallow. Then Kale smelled blood. Not fresh, not old, wrong. As if the blood had been spilled many times in the same place, and remembered each wound. He raised a fist. The hunters stopped. Ahead, between the trees, something moved. A shape crouched beside a frozen stream, enormous and black, its shoulders hunched, its muzzle lowered to the water. Moonlight slid over scarred fur. Silver eyes reflected between the branches. One hunter inhaled too sharply. The beast's head snapped up. "Hold," Kale whispered, but Captain Soren fired his crossbow. The bolt struck the beast's flank. It screamed, a sound so human that every wolf in the hunting party flinched. Then, it vanished into the trees with impossible speed. The hunters gave chase. Kale cursed and followed, anger burning through the weakness in his blood. They ran beneath branches that clawed at their faces, across roots slick with frost, through fog that smelled of wet stone and old graves. Twice, Kyle saw the beast ahead of them. Twice it slowed, not because it was wounded, but because it kept looking back, as if trying to lead them away from something. Then they found the children, 3 of them, hidden beneath the roots of a fallen pine, wrapped in a torn cloak, alive, shivering, their faces streaked with ash. The oldest, a boy no more than 8, clutched a wooden charm so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Kale knelt before him. "Who put you here?" The boy's lips trembled. "The monster," one of the hunters spat. "It was saving them for later." The boy shook his head violently. "No, it killed the red-eyed wolves. It carried my sister. It put us here before the men in white masks came back." Kyle went still. Behind him, Soren said, "Children in shock tell strange tales." Kyle rose slowly. White masks? The boy nodded. Like bones. For the first time that night, Kyle felt his wolf lift its head. They followed the beast's blood trail deeper into the forest, but the trail did not lead to a den filled with bones. It led to a ruined shrine swallowed by ivy and black moss. Old moon symbols covered the stones. Some had been carved centuries ago. Others were fresh. At the center of the shrine lay a circle of silver chains, broken open from the inside. Beside them, half buried in snow, Kale found a strip of linen embroidered with the royal council's seal. No one spoke. Then dawn began to pale the sky, and somewhere beyond the shrine, the monster screamed again. Kyle ran toward the sound alone. He found it in a clearing where the trees bent inward like witnesses. The beast lay on its side, clawing at the earth, the crossbow bolt still lodged in its flank. Its body shuddered beneath the first touch of sunlight. Kale drew his sword, but not to strike. He approached carefully, every instinct warning him that the creature was dangerous, every buried part of him whispering that danger was not the whole truth. The beast saw him and tried to crawl away. That stopped him more surely than an attack would have. Easy, Kyle said, though he had not spoken gently to anyone in years. I am not here to hurt you. The beast's lips peeled back from bloodied teeth. Its growl shook the clearing, but its eyes were changing again, silver flickering, darkening, breaking apart into something human. Ktigel watched in horror as the transformation took her. Bones shifted, fur receded, claws split and softened. The monstrous body folded inward until a young woman lay curled in the snow, gasping as if every breath had to be stolen from death. The sword lowered in his hand. She was thin, bruised and trembling, with black hair tangled around her face and a silver bolt buried in her side. The mark on her chest pulsed weakly. Kale recognized the cracked crescent from forbidden histories locked beneath the palace library. A vessel mark, a darkness bearer, a curse outlawed after the first moon temples fell. Her eyes opened. They were gray, almost colorless in the dawn. When she saw the sword, she did not beg for her life. She only whispered, "Did I kill them?" Kyle's throat tightened. "Who?" "The children." "No." Her face broke so suddenly it was worse than weeping. Relief passed through her like pain. She closed her eyes and pressed one shaking hand over the mark on her chest. "Then, chain me before sunset." Kale stared at her. "Why?" "Because it comes back when the light leaves." Her voice was rough, unused, like someone who had spent years speaking only to stone. "And if it finds too much darkness inside me." She opened her eyes again. "I won't know who I'm killing." Branches snapped behind them. Soren and the hunters entered the clearing with weapons raised. "There," Soren shouted. "The beast." The girl flinched so hard, she tore the wound in her side wider. Blood spread across the snow. Kale stepped between her and the crossbows. The clearing went silent. Soren's eyes narrowed. "Your Majesty?" Kale did not look away from the hunters. "Lower your weapons. That thing slaughtered villages. That thing saved 3 children last night." A murmur passed through the men. Soren's mouth tightened. "With respect, my king, we have orders from the council to destroy the monster on sight." Kale turned his head slowly. "You take orders from the council while standing in front of your king?" Color rose in Soren's face. One by one, the hunters lowered their bows. Behind Kale, the girl whispered, "You should not have done that." He glanced back. "Protected you?" "Been seen protecting me." Something in her voice told him she understood courts better than a forest prisoner should. Before he could answer, her body went slack. The cold, the wound, and the transformation took her. Kale caught her before she hit the snow. The moment his hand touched her skin, his dying wolf surged awake with a force that nearly drove him to his knees. Mate. The word did not come from his mind. It came from bone, blood, breath, beast. It roared through him so violently that the forest seemed to tilt. His wolf clawed upward, no longer weak, no longer distant, but desperate, furious, alive. Kyle's arms tightened around the unconscious girl. The scent of her was buried beneath blood, curse, smoke, and winter. But beneath all of it was something his soul recognized. Rain on ash, moonlight on black water, a home he had never been allowed to find. No, his jaw clenched. Not this, not her, not a cursed girl who turned into the kingdom's nightmare, not when his throne was cracking, not when the council waited for one mistake, not when a prophecy, spoken over his cradle by a dying oracle, had warned that the woman who woke his wolf would also bring ruin to his crown. Soren watched him too closely. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "shall I bind her?" Kael lifted the girl into his arms. "No," he said, and somewhere deep beneath the forest, something ancient heard him choose her first. The ride back to the capital should have taken half a day. It took nearly 2, because the forest did not want to release them. Paths shifted. Trees leaned across trails that had been clear moments before. Wolves, with red eyes, watched from ridges but did not attack. Twice, Kael woke from brief, uneasy sleep to find Alara standing barefoot at the edge of camp, eyes open but unseeing, whispering in a language older than the pack's. Each time, the cracked moon mark glowed beneath her torn cloak. Each time, his wolf pressed against his ribs, not in fear of her, but in fear for her. She spoke little when conscious. She accepted water only after watching him drink first. She refused meat until he ordered everyone else away and left bread beside her without command. She never asked where they were taking her. That unsettled him most. Prisoners demanded answers. Innocents protested. Alara behaved like someone for whom captivity was not a possibility, but a familiar room. On the second night, while the hunters slept and Soren pretended to, Kael found her sitting beneath a dead cedar, staring at the moonless sky. "You should be resting," he said. "You should have killed me in the clearing." He stood beside her, looking out into the dark. "I do not take execution advice from wounded strangers. I am not a stranger to your kingdom." "No," he said quietly. "I am beginning to understand that." Her fingers tightened around the blanket he had given her. "Then you know what I am. I know what they made you carry." Her face turned toward him sharply. For the first time, anger burned through the exhaustion. "Do not soften it. Soft words are how they keep the knife clean." Kael studied her in the firelight. There it was not power, not magic, not the beast. Her strength. A girl who had been broken open every month and still had enough pride to reject pity. "You are right," he said. "Tell me the hard words." She looked away. For a long moment, he thought she would refuse. Then she spoke in a voice so low the sleeping men could not hear. "The curse takes darkness from the kingdom and puts it in me. Not all of it. Enough to keep the noble houses clean. Enough to keep madness from bloodlines that should have ended. Enough to keep treason from showing on the faces of men who smile beside your throne." Her eyes flicked to Soren's sleeping shape. "Every full moon, they open the mark. I become what the kingdom refuses to confess." Kael felt cold spread through him. Who is they? The old moon temple, the council, the healers who pretend not to know, the guards who bring offerings and call them criminals so they can sleep afterward. His hand curled at his side. "Lord Vare?" Her silence was answer enough. "Why the villages?" he asked. "Why now? I did not kill them." She said it quickly, then swallowed as though she hated how much she needed him to believe her. "At least, I do not think I did. The beast remembers in pieces. Blood, running, red eyes, white masks, children crying. Sometimes I wake with bodies near me and no memory of how they died." Her voice thinned, but those villages were wrong. I could feel it. The darkness was outside me. Kael crouched before her. She stiffened, but did not move away. "What does that mean?" "It means someone is pulling pieces of the curse out before the full moon." Her gaze met his. "Someone is teaching the darkness to walk without me." The fire cracked between them. Beyond the trees, a wolf howled once and fell silent. Kael thought of the dying bond inside his chest, the throne rejecting his blood, the council growing bolder, The prophecy he had spent his life trying to outrun. The woman before him with a kingdom's sin carved into her skin. "What is your name?" he asked. She looked startled, as if no one had asked her that in years. "Ilara," she said at last. "Ilara Wren." The name moved through him like a key turning in a lock. "Ilara," he repeated. Her breath caught at the sound of it. Neither of them spoke after that. But when the wind shifted and she shivered, Cale removed his cloak and placed it around her shoulders. She stared at the dark fabric, at the royal clasp shaped like a wolf crowned in ash, as if it weighed more than chains. "You should not give me things marked with your house," she whispered. "Why?" "Because people will think I belong to you." Cale looked into the trees, where unseen things waited. "Perhaps that is what frightens them." She turned toward him, and for one dangerous moment, the silence between them felt less like suspicion and more like the edge of something neither of them could afford to name. Then the bells of the capital began ringing in the distance. Not welcome bells, trial bells. Lord Vere had reached the city before them, and by the time Cale carried Ilara through the iron gates of Ashbourne, the entire royal court had gathered to watch the monster come home. Snow fell over Ashbourne in slow gray sheets as the gates of the capital opened beneath the sound of iron bells. The city climbed the mountain like a wound carved into black stone, its towers sharp as wolf fangs against the winter sky. Smoke drifted from crowded chimneys. Market lanterns flickered beneath the storm. Thousands of eyes followed the royal hunting party as it entered the lower streets, but none lingered on the soldiers for long. They stared at the girl riding beside the Alpha King. Ilara sat wrapped in Cale's black cloak atop a warhorse too large for her slight frame. Her wrists were not chained, though every noble in the city clearly believed they should have been. People moved away as she passed. Some crossed themselves with moon signs. Others spat into the snow. Children hid behind their mothers. Wolves growled low in alleyways without understanding why. The rumors had already outrun them. The forest monster had a human face, and the king had brought it home alive. Cale ignored the whispers as they climbed toward the upper city, though each one sharpened the tension already tightening behind his ribs. His wolf remained awake, painfully awake every time Ilara drew near. That alone was enough to terrify him. For nearly a year, his beast had faded further into silence each day, as if death had begun swallowing it piece by piece. Now it paced inside him restlessly whenever she breathed. The bond should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing too close to a cliff edge in the dark. At the palace gates, rows of royal guards waited with silver spears lowered. Above them, the banners of the Crown of Ash snapped violently in the wind. Lord Vere stood at the top of the black marble steps beside members of the royal council, their fur-lined robes gleaming with silver embroidery. The old priestess of the Moon Temple waited among them in white veils, her pale hands folded calmly as though she were attending a wedding instead of an execution. The moment Ilara saw her, all color vanished from her face. Cale noticed. The priestess smiled. "There is our lost creature," she said softly, though her voice carried across the courtyard with eerie clarity. "You caused quite a panic in the forest, child." Ilara flinched at the word child, more than she had flinched at weapons. Cale dismounted slowly. "She will be treated as a witness until I determine what truly happened in those villages." Murmurs broke across the steps. Lord Vere descended one stair at a time. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "with respect, this girl is the beast responsible for the deaths. She was also found protecting children, a clever disguise for a predator." Cale's gaze hardened. "You seem eager to condemn her before any questioning." Vere's expression remained smooth. "And you seem eager to defend her." The courtyard stilled. Even the snow seemed to hesitate between them. Cale knew the trap the moment the words left Vere's mouth. The council had spent years surviving kings by learning exactly which rumors destroyed them fastest. Weakness, hesitation, attachment. If the court believed Cale's judgment was clouded by a cursed girl, his enemies would begin circling openly. But then Ilara spoke. "Put me below the palace," she said quietly. Everyone looked at her. Her voice was rough from disuse, but steady. Chain me before nightfall. If the curse breaks loose inside the city, people will die." The honesty in her tone unsettled the court more than denial would have. Kale turned toward her. "You believe you cannot control it?" A shadow crossed her face. "I believe I was never meant to." The priestess stepped forward then, white veils stirring around her like smoke. Her name was Mother Celine, though no one in Ashbourne spoke it above a whisper. She had served 3 kings, survived 6 assassination attempts, and guided every royal moon ritual since Kyle was a child. The kingdom treated her like a holy woman. Ilara looked at her like prey, looks at the hand that taught it fear. "My king," Celine said gently. "The girl speaks wisely. The curse worsens each cycle. We should return her to the temple before another tragedy occurs." Ilara's breathing changed. Small, quick, panicked. Kyle saw her fingers digging into the cloak wrapped around her shoulders hard enough to tremble. "No," she whispered before she could stop herself. The entire courtyard heard it. Celine tilted her head almost sympathetically. "You are frightened, child. Understandably so. But the temple exists to help carry your burden." Kyle watched Ilara's face carefully. Not once did she look at the priestess with trust. Only terror. That was enough. "She stays under royal protection," Kale said. The silence afterward felt dangerous. Vare's eyes narrowed slightly. "You would place a moon-cursed vessel inside the palace itself?" "I would place a witness where the council cannot decide her testimony before I hear it." The insult landed cleanly. Several nobles looked away. Celine folded her hands again. "As you wish, Your Majesty. But curses hidden inside castles tend to spread." Kale stepped closer to her. "And secrets hidden inside temples?" For the first time, the priestess's smile thinned. Then she bowed gracefully and stepped aside. The palace servants recoiled when Ilara entered the royal halls. Ashbourne Palace was ancient enough to feel alive in places. Black stone corridors curved beneath vaulted ceilings, painted with silver moons and battle scenes from the first Alpha Wars. Firelight glowed against dark banners embroidered with wolves crowned in ash. The air smelled of cedar smoke, candle wax, iron, and winter roses from the inner gardens. Ilara walked through it like someone moving inside a dream she expected to shatter. Servants lowered their eyes too slowly. Guards shifted their grips on spears. Some stared openly at the scars around her throat. Others watched the cracked crescent mark beneath her collarbone with poorly hidden revulsion. No one offered her kindness, but no one dared touch her while Kyle walked beside her. That frightened them more. Kale led her not to the dungeon cells beneath the palace, but to the old northern tower, abandoned since his mother's death years earlier. Snow pressed against the narrow windows. Dust covered the furniture. The room smelled untouched, frozen in time. Ilara stopped, near the doorway. "Why here?" "Because no one comes here. Your council will hate that. My council hates many things. That does not mean they fail to destroy them." The bluntness nearly surprised a laugh out of him. Nearly. Kale motioned for the guards to leave. Once the heavy doors shut behind them, silence settled across the chamber. Ilara remained standing near the entrance, tense as a cornered animal. "You can sit," Kale said. Her eyes flicked toward the chairs, then toward the windows, measuring exits. "You think I will lock you inside?" he realized. "You are a king, and?" She swallowed. "Kings do not usually keep monsters unchained unless they plan to use them." The words struck harder than they should have. Kale removed his gloves slowly. "Is that what they did to you?" Ilara said nothing. That silence answered more honestly than speech. He crossed the room and poured hot water into a basin near the fire. "Your wound needs cleaning." Immediately, she stepped backward. Kale paused. Fear. Real fear. Not of pain, of being touched. His chest tightened unexpectedly. "No one will hurt you here," he said carefully. The look she gave him then was almost unbearable. Not disbelief. Worse, the exhausted look of someone who had once believed those words and survived long enough to learn better. Kyle set the cloth beside the basin instead of approaching her. "Do it yourself then." For several seconds, neither moved. Finally, slowly, Ilara crossed the room and knelt beside the basin. She washed the blood from her side with controlled, practiced movements that told him she had tended wounds alone many times before. Beneath the dirt and bruises, her skin carried pale silver scars, shaped like branching roots across her ribs and spine. Not scars from battle. Magic scars. Moon channeling. The curse had been carved through her body repeatedly. Kale looked away before she noticed him staring. Outside, thunder rolled beyond the mountains. "Ilara," he said quietly. "What happens during the full moon?" Her hands stopped moving. At first, he thought she would refuse to answer. Then she spoke without looking at him. "The mark opens. That much I understand." "No," she whispered. "You don't." The fire crackled softly between them. "When the moon rises," she continued, "I can feel everything buried inside the kingdom. Rage, cruelty, murder, grief. It pours into me until I cannot separate myself from it anymore." Her fingers tightened against the cloth in her hands. "At first, I still knew who I was afterward. I remembered names, faces, small things." She looked down at the water stained pink with blood. "Now there are nights I wake and cannot remember if the screaming belonged to me or someone else." Kyle remained silent. "There are moments," she admitted softly, "when the darkness feels good." That frightened her more than the curse itself. He could hear it. "I become hungry, violent, angry at everything alive. I hear heartbeats and want them to stop." Her voice trembled for the first time. "And the worst part is that sometimes I think those feelings are mine." Kyle moved before thinking. He crouched in front of her. Ilara froze instantly, but he did not touch her. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "No child is born wanting blood." Her gray eyes lifted slowly toward his. "What they forced into you is not the same thing as who you are." For a moment, the room became unbearably still. Something flickered across her face then. Not hope. She had lived too long without it for that. Recognition. As if no one had ever separated the monster from the girl before. The bond between them tightened so suddenly that Kale felt it beneath his skin. Mate. The word echoed again inside his blood. Dangerous. Impossible. Real. Ilara looked away first. "You should stop looking at me like that," she whispered. Kale frowned slightly. "Like what?" "Like you pity me." His expression darkened. "I do not pity you." "Then that is worse." Before he could answer, heavy knocking thundered against the chamber doors. A guard entered hurriedly and bowed. "Your Majesty, the council demands immediate assembly in the throne hall." "Of course they do," Kale muttered. The guard hesitated before glancing uneasily toward Ilara. "They also request the girl's presence." Kale rose slowly. Ilara's face had gone pale again. "They know," she said softly. "What?" "That sunrise changed me." Her fingers drifted unconsciously toward the cracked moon mark. "Usually it takes hours before I can hold a human shape." Fear sharpened her voice. "They are going to test the curse." Kale's eyes hardened instantly. "No one touches you without my order." But when he offered his hand to help her stand, Ilara stared at it like a blade. Not because she feared him, because she wanted to believe him. And that terrified her more. The throne hall filled before sunset. Word spread quickly through Ashbourne whenever blood or scandal approached the crown. Nobles packed the upper balconies draped in silver and black. Rival alphas stood near the columns watching for weakness in the king's posture. Priestesses lit moon candles along the walls until pale fire danced across the stone chamber like restless spirits. At the center of the hall stood the ancient judgment circle. A ring of silver symbols hammered directly into the black floor centuries ago to expose forbidden magic. Ilara stopped walking the moment she saw it. Kale noticed immediately. "What does that circle do?" he asked quietly. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "It forces the curse to surface." Rage moved through him so quickly, it almost startled him. The council already knew. This had been planned before he returned. Lord Vere rose from his seat near the throne as Kale entered. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, "for the safety of the kingdom, We must confirm whether the creature truly stands under control. She is wounded, and if the curse spreads before the next full moon, the court murmured uneasily. Fear was easy to cultivate in Ashbourne. Fear made people obedient. Kale stepped onto the dais. This hearing will remain civil. Veyer bowed slightly. Naturally. Liar. Kale could smell it. Alara remained near the entrance beneath the stare of hundreds of watching eyes. She looked small against the massive throne hall, wrapped in dark fabric that still carried the king's scent and crest. Some nobles noticed that too. He saw the whispers begin instantly. Dangerous whispers. The old priestess Celine approached the judgment circle, carrying a silver staff carved with moon runes. "Alara Wren," she said gently. "Step forward." Ilara did not move. The hall grew colder. Kale descended from the throne platform. If this test harms her, Celine's pale gaze met his. "If the curse cannot survive moonlight, Your Majesty, then surely it has nothing to hide." That was not the point. Kale knew it. So did Ilara. The point was humiliation, exposure, fear. They wanted the court to see the monster before the king could humanize her. Ilara finally stepped toward the circle on trembling legs. Not because she trusted them, because she had spent too many years learning resistance, only made the chains tighter. The silver symbols ignited beneath her feet. Instantly, the mark on her chest burned black. Ilara gasped sharply. The court leaned forward. Kale's wolf snarled inside him. Silver light spread through the circle like roots beneath ice. Ilara's body stiffened violently as dark veins climbed her throat. The torches flickered. Wolves throughout the hall began growling low and anxious. Then, the whispers started. Not from the crowd. From the circle itself. Ancien voix. Crying. Screaming. Praying. Ilara clutched her head. "Stop," Kale said sharply. Celine ignored him. "Observe carefully," the priestess announced to the court. "This is the burden carried by forbidden vessels." The silver brightened. Ilara dropped to one knee. Kyle moved immediately toward her, and the circle exploded with black moonlight. The entire hall shook. Nobles screamed. The silver symbols cracked apart as a wave of darkness burst outward like a living storm. Every torch extinguished at once. Wolves howled in panic. The windows shattered inward beneath a scream that did not sound entirely human. At the center of the ruined circle, Ilara lifted her head. Her eyes glowed silver. Shadows spread behind her across the floor like enormous claws, and every wolf in the throne hall lowered itself instinctively in submission. Not to the king, to her. The court stared in frozen horror. Kael's heart slammed against his ribs, because for one impossible moment, hidden beneath the monster, hidden beneath the curse, hidden beneath years of chains and suffering, something ancient looked back through Ilara's eyes, something royal. And somewhere high above the palace, the moon appeared through storm clouds hours before nightfall. The throne hall remained frozen, long after the darkness vanished. No one moved. No one breathed. The shattered remains of the judgment circle smoked across the black stone floor while silver dust drifted through the air like ash after a fire. Nobles clung to the balcony rails in terrified silence. Several guards had fallen to one knee without understanding why their wolves had submitted. Even the banners hanging from the vaulted ceiling hung strangely still, as though the hall itself feared making noise. At the center of the ruined circle, Ilara knelt trembling. The silver light had faded from her eyes, leaving them gray again, but shadows still curled faintly beneath her skin, like veins of smoke trapped inside glass. Blood slid from one nostril down her mouth. Her breathing sounded wrong, painfully shallow, like something inside her had cracked open. Kyle descended the dais immediately. "Do not touch her." The command came from Lord Veyer. Too fast, too sharp. Kale stopped halfway toward Ilara and slowly turned. Veyer had risen from his seat near the throne, his face pale beneath the torchlight. Fear showed there now despite his efforts to hide it. Not fear of the monster. Fear of what the court had just witnessed. Every wolf had bowed, not to power, not to violence. Instinctively, anciently, as if something buried deep in pack memory had awakened for the first time in centuries. "She nearly destroyed the hall," Ver said, recovering his composure. "The curse is escalating exactly as we warned." Kale's gaze darkened. "Your test caused this. The kingdom deserves to know what lives inside its walls. The kingdom deserves to know why the royal council kept a cursed girl imprisoned beneath a temple for 15 years. The silence that followed struck harder than a scream. Faces shifted across the balconies. Confusion. Shock. Fear. Alara looked up slowly from the broken circle. For the first time since entering the palace, she looked frightened, not for herself, but for him. "Kale," she whispered. It was the first time she had spoken his name. The sound of it hit him like a blade dragged slowly beneath his ribs. Mate. His wolf surged violently. Several nearby alphas staggered at the force of the scent suddenly flooding the hall. It burst free before Kale could contain it. Cedar smoke, winter steel, storm fire, and something deeper, older, unmistakable. The scent of a mating bond, awakening. The court realized it instantly. Gasps erupted across the chamber. Celine's eyes widened for the first time all evening, and Lord Ver went perfectly still. No, not still. Calculating. Kael understood the danger immediately. A king bound to a moon-cursed vessel. A ruler emotionally compromised by forbidden magic. A throne already weakened by rumors of his failing wolf. If the court believed the curse controlled him, civil war would spread through the northern packs before the next snowfall. Ilara Wren, Ver said carefully. "Step away from the king." Ilara flinched. Not because of the order, because she expected Kale to obey it. Kael looked at her, saw the exhaustion carved into her body, saw the blood on her mouth, saw the terror she hid beneath silence every time the court looked at her like a weapon instead of a person. Then he looked at the nobles watching from above, and for one dangerous heartbeat, he considered drawing his sword against every single one of them. Instead, he walked directly into the shattered remains of the circle. The silver beneath his boots hissed. Gasps rippled through the hall. The judgment circle was designed to expose forbidden magic. Entering it willingly beside a cursed vessel was madness. Kale ignored them all. He crouched before Ilara and held out his hand. "Stand." The entire court stared in disbelief. Ilara looked at his hand as though it burned. "You should not do this publicly," she whispered. "That implies I intend to hide it privately." Her breath caught. Very slowly, uncertainly, she placed her trembling hand in his. The moment their skin touched, the broken silver symbols across the floor lit again. A collective cry tore through the throne hall. Moonlight exploded upward around them in a pillar of pale fire. Kale's wolf roared awake inside him. Not weak, not dying, alive. For the first time in nearly a year, strength flooded his veins so violently it almost drove him to his knees. His senses sharpened instantly, heartbeat, breath, fear, blood, snow, melting beyond the windows. He felt the bond between man and beast reconnect with terrifying force. The court saw it happen, saw the king straighten, saw color return to his face, saw power blaze across the alpha bond rippling through the hall, and every noble understood the same horrifying truth at once. The cursed girl had not weakened the king. She had healed him. Kael stared at Ilara in shock. She looked equally stunned. She swallowed hard. That should not happen. Celine stepped forward slowly, her white robes trailing across the floor like ghost smoke. "Impossible." Kale's eyes narrowed. "You sound frightened, priestess." Celine did not answer immediately, because she was frightened. Not of Ilara. Alone. Of what Ilara represented. Ancient histories whispered of moon vessels centuries ago, before the first Alpha dynasties unified the northern kingdoms. Women capable of carrying corruption away from the land itself. Women tied not to thrones, but to the old moon goddess whose temples had been destroyed after the rise of royal bloodlines. Most were executed. The survivors vanished. But one prophecy had remained buried beneath the old temple libraries. When the kingdom rots from within, The Hollow Queen shall rise, bearing the darkness they buried beneath her skin. Wolves will kneel before the cursed crown, and the king bound to her blood will either save the realm or burn beside it. Celine knew the prophecy. So did Vere, and judging by the sudden terror in their faces, they realized the prophecy might already be unfolding. Ilara Wren, Vere said sharply, regaining control of his voice. By authority of the Royal Council, you are hereby confined pending investigation into charges of forbidden sorcery, treasonous corruption, and mass murder. Kael rose slowly to his feet beside her. You presume authority that belongs to the throne. The throne does not stand above ancient law. Kael's expression hardened. Ancient law also forbids the forced creation of moon vessels. Shall we discuss which laws the council values selectively? Whispers erupted again. Ilara looked between them in growing alarm. This was becoming dangerous, too quickly. Not because of her. Because Kael was exposing fractures the kingdom had hidden for generations. Vere understood it too, which meant he would escalate. And he did. Then, perhaps. Vere said softly, the court should discuss why the Alpha King's wolf suddenly recovered the moment he touched a cursed girl. The room went still. Kael's heartbeat slowed dangerously. There it was. The true attack. Not against Ilara. Against the throne. Several rival alphas exchanged glances, instantly. Rumors of Kael's weakening wolf had existed for months beneath court whispers. Nothing proven, nothing public. Until now. If the king's strength depends on forbidden magic, Vere continued, the stability of Ashbourne itself may already be compromised. You tread close to treason, Kael said quietly, and you tread close to corruption. The words cracked across the hall like ice breaking over deep water. Ilara saw it then. The real battlefield. Not the curse. Not the monster. Power. The council feared losing control of the kingdom more than they feared darkness itself. And now Kael stood too close to the one thing capable of exposing them. Suddenly, Ilara understood why the villages had burned. Someone needed the kingdom terrified enough to accept whatever came next. A new king. A pour. A war. Or all three. Her chest tightened sharply. The mark. Pain exploded beneath her ribs. Ilara gasped violently and doubled over. Kael caught her instantly. The cracked crescent on her chest glowed black beneath the torn fabric. Not silver. Black. Wrong. Celine's face changed immediately. Fear. Real fear. Ilara, the priestess said sharply. What did you absorb in the forest? Ilara's breathing turned ragged. I don't know. Answer me. I said I don't know. The torches flickered wildly. Shadows spread across the floor beneath her feet. Kael felt cold rush through the hall. His wolf snarled. Something was moving inside the curse. Something awake. Ilara clutched at her chest in panic. No. The shadow beneath her split open, and another voice whispered from inside it. Not Ilara's voice. Amen's. Ancien. Rotting. Hungry. The gate is weakening. The throne hall erupted into chaos. Guards drew blades. Nobles screamed. Several wolves shifted partially in panic, claws ripping through silk and stone. Kael pulled Ilara behind him immediately as black smoke burst from the cracked moon mark across her skin. The darkness did not move like magic. It moved like something alive. Faces twisted inside it, dozens of them, crying, screaming, mouths opening silently beneath the smoke, as if souls themselves had been trapped within the curse for centuries. Celine staggered backward in horror. No, she whispered. It should not be conscious yet. Kael heard that. His gaze snapped toward her instantly. Yet? Too late. The shadow surged outward violently before she could answer. The nearest guard screamed as black smoke wrapped around his throat and hurled him across the hall hard enough to crack stone pillars. Wolves throughout the chamber went mad with panic. Several nobles rushed toward the exits, only to slam against doors suddenly sealed by writhing darkness. Ilara dropped to the floor shaking. It's awake, she gasped. Kael, run. He ignored the warning and knelt beside her. What is happening? Terror filled her eyes. The darkness remembers him now. Him who? Before she could answer, the shadow behind her rose upward into the shape of something enormous, not fully formed, just a silhouette, a monstrous wolf-like figure with burning silver eyes. The entire throne hall froze beneath its presence. Ancient power flooded the chamber so heavily even rival alphas lowered themselves instinctively. Then the creature looked directly at Kael and smiled, not with lips, with recognition. Kael felt ice slide through his veins, because buried beneath the monstrous shape, he recognized the crown, not physically, spiritually. En alpha, ancien, royal, dead. What are you? Kael demanded. The shadow's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. I was king, before your bloodline learned to kneel to fear. Then the darkness vanished. Instantly, the pressure disappeared from the room, so abruptly, several nobles collapsed, gasping. Ilara lay unconscious against the shattered stone floor. Kael caught her, before her head struck the ground. The hall remained silent, except for terrified breathing. No one moved. No one dared speak first. Finally, one of the elder nobles whispered the thought haunting every mind in the room. The first king, Lord Vare's face had gone completely bloodless. Celine looked worse, not shocked. Guilty. Kael rose slowly with Ilara in his arms. His eyes swept across the court, across the council, across the priestess, across the men who had spent years ruling through fear, while hiding truths beneath temples and forests and blood rituals. Then his voice cut through the silence like a drawn blade. Clear the hall. No one argued, because for the first time in years, the Alpha King looked truly terrifying again. And somewhere beneath the palace, far below the throne and stone and royal banners, something ancient began waking in chains. The throne hall emptied in terrified silence. Nobles fled without dignity. Council members abandoned arguments mid-breath. Guards dragged the injured from the broken chamber while refusing to look too closely at the cracks spreading across the black stone floor beneath the shattered judgment circle. Even the wolves of the royal guard remained uneasy, pacing restlessly with ears flattened, as though they could still smell the ancient thing that had spoken through Ilara's curse. Only 3 people remained when the doors finally sealed shut. Kael, Ilara, unconscious in his arms, and Mother Celine. The old priestess stood near the ruined circle, her white robe stained with ash, her pale face stripped of its usual calm. For the first time since Kael had known her, she looked old, not wise, not holy, afraid. Kael carried Ilara to the base of the throne dais and laid her carefully across the fur-covered steps. Her skin burned with fever. Black veins still flickered faintly beneath her throat, before vanishing again beneath pale flesh. His wolf remained fully awake, watching her, guarding her. Every instinct inside him screamed that she was in danger, not from the curse, from the people surrounding it. Kael rose slowly and turned towards Celine. What did I just see? The priestess remained silent. Kael descended the dais one deliberate step at a time. You will answer me. Celine lowered her gaze briefly. Not here. Then perhaps you would prefer the dungeon. Her eyes lifted sharply. The threat was real. For years, the court had whispered that Kael inherited too much of his father's brutality and too little of his mercy. Tonight, those whispers no longer felt exaggerated. You do not understand what you are protecting, Celine said quietly. Kael stopped directly in front of her. No, I understand perfectly. A girl was chained beneath your temple while the kingdom called her a monster. Pain flickered across the priestess's face. Not guilt. Memory. You think I wanted this? She whispered. You kept her there, to keep the kingdom alive. Rage surged through him instantly. Do not dare call torture duty. Celine closed her eyes briefly. When the old moon temples fell, she said at last, the darkness buried beneath this land did not disappear. It spread. Villages turned on themselves. Wolves slaughtered entire packs during blood frenzy. Madness consumed the northern kingdoms. The first royal houses, nearly collapsed within a generation. Her voice roughened. Then, the vessels were created. Kyle's jaw tightened. Children, yes. The word echoed through the empty throne hall, like a confession. Girls capable of carrying corruption into themselves before it poisoned the realm entirely. Most died within months. Celine looked toward Ilara, unconscious near the throne. She survived. Kyle's stomach turned cold. Not because of the cruelty, because of the scale. How many? The priestess hesitated. How many? He repeated. Hundreds, she whispered. The silence afterward felt monstrous. Kyle stared at her, at the woman who had stood beside kings his entire life, who had blessed armies, who had crowned rulers, who had spoken of sacrifice while feeding children to ancient darkness beneath the kingdom. You buried this beneath holy rituals, he said softly. We buried it beneath survival. No, Kale said. You buried it beneath convenience. Celine's composure cracked then. You think I do not hear them? She demanded suddenly. Every full moon, every child we failed, every vessel who screamed for their mother while the darkness consumed them. Tears filled her pale eyes. But Kale felt no comfort in them. I was 19 when they brought me the first cursed girl. 19. They told me the kingdom would die if I refused. They told me one life weighed less than thousands. Her voice broke, and after the first one died, they brought another. Kale looked away before his anger became something irreversible. Outside the shattered windows, thunder rolled across the mountains. Ilara stirred weakly near the throne. Immediately, Kale crossed back to her side. Her body trembled violently beneath the furs. Sweat dampened her dark hair despite the winter cold. She looked exhausted beyond human endurance, as though something inside her had spent years devouring pieces she could never reclaim. The mark on her chest glowed faintly. Not silver, black. Kale touched the edge of the cracked crescent carefully. Instantly, pain slammed through his mind. Visions exploded behind his eyes. Sang, blood, a child screaming beneath moonlight, stone chambers beneath the earth, hands forcing black smoke into a small body while priestesses prayed. Then, another image struck harder than the rest. A throne beneath the palace. Ossia, buried, wrapped in roots of black ash, and beneath it, something breathing. Kyle jerked his hand away sharply. Ilara gasped awake at the same moment. Her gray eyes flew open in panic. Don't let him see you. Kale frowned. Who? But her gaze was unfocused, half trapped in memory. The king beneath the roots, she whispered. He's waking up. Selena Ventpala. Kyle saw it instantly. You know exactly what she means. The priestess did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. Kale rose slowly. Start talking. Celine looked toward the sealed throne hall doors as though considering escape. There are older things beneath Ashbourne than your dynasty, she said at last. Long before the Alpha Kings united the northern packs, this land belonged to another ruler. The first king, Kale said. Celine nodded once. He ruled before written records survived. Some called him the Hollow King. Others called him the Wolf of Ash. Her voice lowered carefully. He was not born from royal blood. He became king because wolves obeyed him instinctively. Entire armies bent the knee without battle. Kale remembered the shadow inside Ilara's curse. The crown, the eyes, the terrible familiarity. What happened to him? The priestess's face tightened. He fell in love. Kale blinked once. Not the answer he expected. Celine continued quietly. The woman he chose carried moon magic older than the packs themselves. Together they were powerful enough to unite the kingdoms. But the noble houses feared them. They believed their bloodline would become untouchable. Her gaze drifted toward Ilara, so they betrayed them. A terrible feeling settled beneath Kale's ribs. They killed her, he said. Celine nodded, and when the king learned what they had done, her voice thinned. The darkness answered him. The storm outside intensified. Lightning flashed through the shattered windows. The stories say he slaughtered entire cities, Celine whispered. Not from cruelty, from grief. The moon itself turned against him. Wolves transformed into monsters beneath his command. Rivers blackened with corruption. Her eyes lifted toward Kale. The surviving nobles sealed him beneath the palace, using forbidden rituals. Then they built the royal dynasty over his grave. Kale stared at her in disbelief. And you think he's inside the curse? No, Celine said quietly. Fear slid through him at her tone. I think the curse was designed to keep him asleep. Silence crashed over the throne hall. Kale looked slowly toward Alara, toward the girl who had spent 15 years carrying darkness inside her body while the kingdom blamed her for surviving it. The realization hit him, piece by piece. The vessels were never meant only to absorb corruption. They were feeding something, keeping something imprisoned. And now, it was waking. Ilara, Kyle said carefully, kneeling beside her again. Look at me. Her eyes opened weakly. When did the voices begin? She swallowed painfully. A few months ago. What changed? At first, she looked uncertain. Then fear crossed her face. The council started opening the mark early. Selena stiffened. Ilara's fingers tightened against the furs. Not every month. Only sometimes. They said the kingdom was becoming unstable. That the darkness needed more space. Her breathing grew uneven. But after each ritual I could feel something deeper beneath it. Watching me. Kyle's gaze sharpened. Why didn't you tell anyone? A hollow laugh escaped her. Who exactly was I supposed to trust? The question struck harder than accusation. Kale looked away briefly. Because she was right. Everyone who should have protected her had failed. Even him, though he had not known her existence until days ago. He still wore the crown built above her suffering. Ilara studied his face quietly. You didn't know, she whispered. Kale met her eyes again. No, he admitted. But I should have. Something softened in her expression then. Not forgiveness. Something more fragile. Understanding. Before either could speak again, pounding erupted against the throne hall doors. Your Majesty. Kyle turned sharply. A guard's voice came through the iron. The northern watchtowers are under attack. The hall froze. Kyle crossed the chamber and threw the doors open. 3 guards stumbled inside, covered in blood and snow. One had claw marks ripped across his chest. Another could barely stand. What happened? The captain dropped to one knee, breathing hard. The black wolves returned. Kale's expression darkened instantly. How many? That's the problem, sire. The captain looked shaken to the bone. They weren't wolves. Cold spread through the hall. The captain swallowed hard. They looked human when the moonlight touched them. Ilara went deathly pale. Kyle saw it immediately. What is it? Her voice trembled. The curse is spreading. The words barely left her mouth before screams echoed from somewhere deep beneath the palace. Not above. Below. Every torch in the throne hall extinguished at once. Darkness swallowed the chamber. Then came the sound. A deep metallic groan rising from beneath the stone foundations of Ashbourne itself. Chai. Massive chain. Breaking underground. Celine staggered backward in horror. No! The palace shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. Guards stumbled. Stone cracked beneath the throne dais with a sound like thunder splitting mountains apart. And far below them, something ancient laughed. The sound rolled upward through the foundations of the palace, low and malevolent and unbearably old. Not loud, worse than loud, intimate, as if it whispered directly into the bones of everyone who heard it. Ilara clutched her chest in agony. Kyle caught her before she collapsed again. The cracked moon mark burned black beneath her skin. And for the first time since the hunt began, Kyle realized the kingdom was not facing a monster. It was facing the return of a king. The palace did not stop shaking for nearly a minute. Stone groaned beneath ancient pressure. Cracks spread across the throne hall floor like black lightning, while dust drifted from the vaulted ceilings in gray clouds. Somewhere deep below, Metal screamed again, the sound of colossal chains dragged slowly across rock after centuries of strain. Then silence returned. Not peace. Waiting. Every wolf inside the palace began howling at once. The sound rose from the lower barracks, the servant quarters, the guard towers, the royal kennels. Thousands of voices crying into the winter dark with instinctive terror. KL felt his own wolf pacing violently beneath his skin. Not afraid. Preparing. Outside the shattered windows, snow twisted sideways beneath a wind that smelled faintly of ash and wet earth, as though something buried underground had finally taken its first breath. Ilara. Her name came out sharper than intended. She looked up weakly from where he still held her upright against the throne dais. The black veins beneath her throat had faded again, but her skin remained pale with exhaustion. What exactly happens if this thing wakes completely? Fear crossed her face instantly. Not fear for herself. For everyone else. I don't know, she whispered. The voices never say clearly. They only... She swallowed hard. They only scream. Kael's jaw tightened. The guards exchanged uneasy glances nearby. One of them, Captain Reese, stepped carefully forward. Unlike Soren, Reese had served Kael since the border wars and rarely frightened easily. Tonight, his face looked carved from ice. Your Majesty, he said quietly, the lower city is already panicking. People saw the moon rise early. Rumors are spreading about the throne hall. Of course they were. Ashbourne survived on fear the way wolves survived on blood. And tonight, fear had tasted something real. Kael looked toward the shattered windows overlooking the city below. Bells were ringing across the capital now. Warning bells. Citizens flooding the streets. Temple fires burning brighter along the lower districts. How much did the court see? He asked. Reese hesitated. Enough. Meaning everything. The king's sudden recovery. The bond. The wolves kneeling. The shadow wearing a crown. Perfect. Civil unrest by dawn. Rival alphas within days. Assassination attempts shortly after. And through it all, Ilara remained at the center of the storm. Not because she wanted power, because powerful people had built their survival around her suffering for too long. Kael looked toward Lord Vare's abandoned seat near the throne. Empty. His expression darkened instantly. Where is the council? Celine answered quietly from across the hall. Gone. Kael turned sharply. The priestess stood rigid beside the ruined judgment circle. Her face drained of color, as though she finally understood how close disaster truly stood. They left the moment the palace shook, she continued. If Vare believes the first king is waking, he will move quickly. To do what? Her silence lasted too long. Selene. The old priestess closed her eyes briefly. There is a fail-safe beneath the old temple. Cold slid through Kael's chest. What kind of fail-safe? Ilara. The hall went still. Kyle stared at her. Celine's voice trembled for the first time since he had known her. The vessels were never intended to survive long. If the darkness ever became unstable beyond control. She looked toward Ilara with visible shame. The curse can be sealed permanently by killing its host before the next full moon. The words hit the room like an execution bell. Reese cursed under his breath. Ilara went perfectly still. Not shocked. Not even angry. Just tired. As though some part of her had always known this moment would come eventually. Kael rose slowly to his feet. No. Celine looked at him helplessly. Your Majesty. No. Power rippled through the throne hall at the single word. The old alpha instinct. Comment? Absolute. The guards immediately lowered their eyes. Even Celine flinched. Kael descended the dais one measured step at a time until he stood directly before the priestess. You will tell me everything the council intends. Celine swallowed hard. Vare believes if Ilara dies before the curse fully opens, the first king will remain trapped beneath the palace. And if she lives? The priestess looked toward Ilara. The seal eventually breaks. Silence settled heavily over the hall. Ilara lowered her gaze. There, she whispered softly. That's the real reason they kept me alive. Kael turned toward her sharply. Not once since entering the palace had she spoken with bitterness about her own suffering. But now something colder moved beneath her voice. They never cared about the villages, or the curse, or the people who died. Her fingers tightened around the furs draped across her shoulders. I was just a wall built around something worse. Kael watched her carefully. The realization was changing her, not into something cruel, something dangerous. Because hopeless people obeyed. But people who discovered their suffering had been meaningless. They burned kingdoms down. Ilara, Kael said carefully. Her gray eyes lifted to his. If the seal breaks, he asked quietly, can you stop it? She laughed, softly. It was the saddest sound he had heard in years. I can barely stop myself. The palace bells rang again outside. Closer this time. Then screams echoed faintly from the lower city. Rhys turned instantly toward the windows. Your Majesty. Kael crossed the hall in 3 strides and looked down over Ashbourne. Smoke rose from the northern district. Not ordinary smoke. Black, moving unnaturally through the streets. Like living fog. Wolves ran below in panic. People screamed. And within the darkness, figures moved. Human shapes. Wrong shapes. Ilara appeared beside him silently. The moment she saw the smoke, horror filled her face. The corrupted. Kael looked at her sharply. Explain. Her breathing quickened. The darkness doesn't always kill what it touches. Sometimes, if there's enough rage already inside someone. She swallowed hard. It changes them. As if answering her words, one of the black figures below lunged through the street and tore a running man apart with impossible speed. The palace guards cursed. Rhys drew his sword instantly. Those aren't wolves. No, Ilara whispered. They're people. Kael watched the chaos spreading through the lower district. Fast. Too fast. Which meant the corruption had already existed inside the city before tonight. Ver. The realization hit instantly. The council had not been trying to stop the darkness. They had been experimenting with it. Kael turned sharply toward Celine. What did they do? The priestess looked sick. Months ago, the council discovered traces of the corruption could strengthen weakened wolves temporarily. Shame thickened her voice. Aggression increased. Healing accelerated. Rival packs became easier to control. Kael stared at her in disbelief. They fed darkness to their own soldiers. Only small amounts at first. Gots. Celine's voice cracked. Ver believed he could weaponize it. Outside, another explosion shook the city. Black smoke climbed higher through the streets. The corrupted were spreading, and Ilara was staring at them with growing panic. Kael noticed immediately. What is it? Her voice trembled. I know them. He frowned. She pointed toward the chaos below. There. At first, he saw nothing unusual. Then, one of the corrupted stumbled briefly into torchlight. A woman, not fully transformed. Black veins crawled across her face while silver foam dripped from her mouth. Her movements jerked unnaturally, caught between human agony and animal violence. Ilara went pale. She worked in the lower temple kitchens. Kael looked at her sharply. She was kind to me. The words hit harder than expected. Not because of tragedy. Because kindness toward Ilara sounded so rare it felt sacred. She used to sneak extra bread into my cell, Ilara whispered. She had a son. Her voice began breaking up. Kael, what if this is my fault? He turned fully toward her. It is not, but the darkness came from me. No, he said sharply. It came through you. Her eyes widened slightly. Kael stepped closer. The difference matters. For one dangerous moment, she looked at him like she might believe him. Then the throne hall doors burst open. Captain Soren entered with nearly 24 armed soldiers behind him, and every blade they carried was silver. The hall went still instantly. Rhys cursed beneath his breath. Kael's expression hardened into something lethal. You arrive armed before your king without permission. Soren bowed stiffly, though his hand never left his sword. Forgive me, your majesty. The council has declared emergency authority under the Old Moon decrees. Rage rolled through the throne hall. Illegal. Ancient emergency powers created during the first corruption wars. Powers allowing the council to override the throne if the kingdom faced supernatural collapse. Kyle descended the dais slowly. You overstep. Soren's jaw tightened. The city is under attack by corrupted civilians. The people demand action. The people demand someone to blame. Silence. Soren's gaze shifted briefly toward Alara. There is still time to contain this. Kyle moved instantly between them. No one touch her. The soldiers behind Soren visibly tensed. Alara watched the scene with growing horror. Not for herself. For what Kale was risking. The council does not seek conflict with the crown, Soren said carefully. But if the vessel remains alive, the corruption will continue spreading. Kyle's wolf snarled violently beneath his skin. Mate. Threat. Protect. The instinct hit hard enough to make his eyes flash gold. Several soldiers stepped backward immediately. You forget who commands this kingdom, Kale said softly. No, Soren answered. I remember exactly. Which is why this pains me. And then Kale saw it. Not ambition. Not hatred. Fear. Real fear. Soren genuinely believed killing Alara would save Ashbourne. That made him more dangerous than a simple traitor. Alara, Soren said quietly, looking at her directly for the first time. If there's any humanity left in you at all, you know what must happen. The throne hall fell silent. Alara stared at him for several long seconds. Then, very softly, I know. Kyle turned sharply toward her. Alara. But she was already looking at the spreading smoke beyond the windows, at the corrupted civilians tearing through the streets below, at the city, beginning to drown beneath the same darkness she had carried alone for 15 years. And for the first time since Kyle met her, he saw surrender in her eyes. Not weakness. Decision. If I die before the full moon, she whispered, the seal holds. No. She looked at him then. Really looked at him. Gray eyes exhausted beyond measure. You don't understand, she said softly. I'm so tired. The word shattered something inside him. Not because she sounded hopeless, because she sounded relieved. Like death no longer frightened her nearly as much as continuing to survive. Kale crossed the distance between them immediately. You do not get to decide this tonight. A faint, broken smile touched her lips. That sounds very kingly of you. And you sound like someone preparing to leave me. The words escaped before he could stop them. The hall went silent. Alara's breath caught. So did his. Mate. The bond surged violently again between them. Zoran saw it. Rhys saw it. Every soldier in the hall saw it. The Alpha King of Ashbourne was in love with the cursed girl. Goads. Kale had not even admitted it fully to himself, until the fear of losing her spoke aloud in his place. Alara stared at him like he had struck her, not because she doubted him, because she wanted desperately to believe him, and that terrified her, more than chains ever had. Suddenly, the palace shook again, harder this time. A deafening crack echoed from somewhere below the throne hall. Then came the scream. Not human. Not wolf. Ancien. The stone floor split directly beneath the ruined judgment circle. Everyone stumbled backward as black roots erupted upward through the cracks, twisting violently across the hall like living veins. The temperature dropped instantly, and from the darkness below, a massive iron chain burst upward through the floor. Broken. Something beneath the palace had finally torn one of its restraints free. Then a voice rolled upward from the abyss beneath Ashbourne. Deep. Male. Terrifyingly calm. Bring me the girl. The voice beneath the palace did not echo. It settled, heavy and ancient and impossibly alive, vibrating through the throne hall stones as though the entire mountain itself had spoken. Bring me the girl. Every torch reignited at once in violent black flame. The soldiers recoiled instinctively. Several dropped their weapons. One young guard began whispering prayers so quickly he could barely breathe. The broken iron chain sprawled across the ruined judgment circle, thick as a man's torso, covered in old symbols burned deep into the metal. Not royal symbols. Warnings. Alara stared at the chain in horror. Her lips parted soundlessly. Kyle saw recognition there, not of the voice itself, of loneliness. The realization chilled him. The thing beneath the palace was not merely calling to the curse. It was calling to her. Soren recovered first. "Now you hear it yourselves," he snapped toward the soldiers. "The corruption speaks through her." "No," Alara whispered suddenly. Everyone looked at her. Her eyes remained fixed on the broken chain. It spoke through the seal. "Silence." Kale stepped closer immediately. "What does that mean?" Her breathing quickened. The voice didn't come from inside me. She looked up slowly, fear sharpening every word. It came from below. Another tremor rolled through the throne hall. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. Far beneath them, something enormous shifted against stone. Kyle's instincts screamed at him to get Alara away from the palace immediately. But before he could speak, Soren drew his silver sword. "We're ending this now." Rhys moved instantly, steel ringing free from its sheath as he stepped between Soren and the throne dais. "Careful, Captain." The soldiers behind Soren hesitated. They feared Kale, but they feared the spreading corruption more. Outside, bells continued ringing across Ashbourne, while distant screams carried through the storm-dark air. The city was unraveling by the minute, and fear always made desperate men dangerous. Soren's jaw tightened. Every moment she remains alive, more people die. Alara closed her eyes briefly. Kyle saw the guilt strike her like a physical blow. Enough. His patience snapped. Power exploded outward from him without restraint. The alpha command hit the hall like a thunderclap. Kneel. Every wolf-blooded soldier in the chamber dropped instantly, including Soren. The force of Kale's authority slammed through the room so violently cracks spread beneath several guards' knees where they struck stone. Wolves whined submissively throughout the palace. Even Rhys lowered his head briefly beneath the overwhelming pressure. Only Alara remained standing, not resisting, unaffected. The entire hall noticed. Kyle noticed too. Mate. Ancient blood. Something older than ordinary alpha bonds. Soren struggled against the command, sweat beading along his forehead. "Your Majesty." "Please." Kale descended the dais slowly, eyes burning gold. "I warned you once already." His voice had gone frighteningly calm. "No one touches her." Soren looked genuinely pained now. "You think this is cruelty? Look outside." Kyle did not need to. He could smell the corruption spreading through the city already. Blood, smoke, terror, darkness, blooming through human bodies like poison finding cracks in stone. But he also understood something else now. Killing Alara would not stop it. It had already escaped. Someone had opened the seal too many times. And somewhere beneath the palace, something ancient had begun waking fully. "The council lied to you," Kale said. Soren's expression hardened stubbornly. "The council protects Ashbourne. The council fed darkness into its own people." A flicker of uncertainty crossed the captain's face. Kyle pressed forward immediately. "They experimented with corruption while hiding behind sacred law. They turned children into prisons and called it survival." Rage sharpened his voice. "And now they want one more sacrifice, because they lost control of what they buried." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Fear cracked certainty faster than any blade. Soren looked toward Alara. She stood motionless beside the throne dais, pale beneath the firelight, dark hair tangled around scarred shoulders, looking less like a monster than a woman too exhausted to defend herself anymore. The image unsettled him. Good. Kyle wanted them unsettled. Wanted them forced to see her as human after years of hearing only stories about beasts in the woods. Then, Alara spoke quietly. "He's right." The room froze. Soren frowned. Alara swallowed hard before continuing. "The corruption spreading through the city. It doesn't feel like mine anymore." Kale turned sharply toward her. "What do you mean?" Her gray eyes lifted slowly toward him. "The darkness inside me always felt trapped, angry, but contained." Fear crept into her expression. "This feels hungry." Another scream echoed from the city below. "Lum," agonized, followed by snarling. Rhys moved toward the shattered windows and cursed softly. The corrupted reached the upper districts. Too fast. Gods. The palace itself would be under attack before midnight. Kyle looked toward Ilara again. She looked back at him with growing certainty. The seal is failing completely. Can it be restored? At first, she did not answer. Then very quietly, I think that depends on him. The broken chain beneath the judgment circle rattled violently. The entire throne hall flinched. A deep laugh rolled upward again from below the palace foundations. Not cruel, almost amused. Then came another voice, not spoken aloud this time. Inside Kael's head, you wear a stolen crown. Kael stiffened instantly. The others had not heard it. Only him. His wolf snarled violently beneath his ribs. Who are you? The answer came slowly, like claws, dragging across stone. The king your blood betrayed. Pain exploded suddenly behind Kael's eyes. Vision slammed into him hard enough to stagger. A throne room, drowned in blood. Wolves tearing soldiers apart. A dark-haired king kneeling beside a dying woman, while moonlight burned silver across her skin. Then fire. Chang. Screaming. Burial. Beneath stone. Kael caught himself against a pillar, breathing hard. Ilara, Rhys said sharply, seeing his expression. What's happening to him? Her face had gone pale. He can hear the bond. Kael looked toward her immediately. Bond? She stared at the broken chain below the throne hall. The first king. Cold spread through the room. Ilara, Kael said carefully. What exactly are you hiding from me? Pain crossed her face instantly. Not because she wanted secrets. Because she feared the answer. The voices inside the curse. Her fingers trembled slightly. They've spoken to me since I was little. Most are only echoes. Fragments. She swallowed hard, but one voice remained clear. The hall fell silent around her. He never screamed, she whispered. He only waited. Another tremor shook the palace. The black roots spreading across the floor twisted farther through the stone. Kael watched her carefully. And what did he tell you? Ilara's eyes glistened faintly in the firelight. He said one day the kingdom would remember what it buried alive. Silence. Gods. Kael finally understood. The first king had been speaking to her for years, not controlling her, keeping her alive. The realization changed everything. Celine seemed to realize it too. Her face went utterly bloodless. No, she whispered. That's impossible. Ilara looked toward the priestess slowly. You told them the vessels couldn't survive the full corruption, she said softly. Celine could not meet her eyes. You were wrong. Kyle stared between them. Then, understanding hit him piece by piece. The first king had not merely survived imprisonment beneath Ashbourne. He had been feeding fragments of his power into the vessels for generations, trying to keep them alive, trying to endure long enough to wake. Suddenly, Ilara swayed violently. Kael crossed the distance instantly and caught her. The moment his arms wrapped around her, the bond surged hot beneath his skin again. Alive, terrified, necessary. Ilara pressed one trembling hand against his chest. Kyle. His name sounded fragile on her lips. What is it? Terror filled her eyes. He knows you're my mate now. The hall went still, deep beneath the palace. The chain screamed again. Then something massive struck stone hard enough to crack the throne hall floor open another inch. The voice rose upward once more, closer this time. Bring her to me. Several soldiers panicked outright. One bolted for the doors. The moment he touched them, black roots burst from the stone and dragged him screaming beneath the floor. Blood sprayed across the hall. Chaos erupted instantly. The soldiers shouted in terror. Rhys drew his blade fully. Soren stumbled backward, pale as death. Even Celine recoiled from the spreading roots writhing across the palace floor like living veins. Kael pulled Ilara behind him immediately. His wolf roared inside him. Protect. Shield. Survive. The black roots twisted upward again toward the throne. Dais. Then suddenly stopped. Every root froze, mid-motion. The hall fell silent, because Ilara had lifted her hand. Not dramatically, not knowingly. Instinctively, the darkness obeyed her. Everyone saw it. The roots slowly lowered back toward the floor like wolves bowing before their queen. Alara stared at her own trembling hand in horror. "I didn't mean." Kyle turned toward the court soldiers immediately before fear could become violence again. "She controls it." Soren looked shaken to the bone. "Or it controls her." "No," Kale said sharply, because he knew the difference now. The roots had not attacked her. They had listened. That terrified him far more. Ilara slowly lowered her hand. The roots retreated deeper into the cracks beneath the throne hall. The palace stopped shaking, and somewhere below, the ancient voice laughed softly, not with cruelty, with pride. Then the throne hall doors burst open again, this time not by soldiers, by a servant girl covered in blood. She collapsed onto the stone, gasping. "Your Majesty." Reese caught her before she struck the floor. "The northern gate fell," she sobbed. "The corrupted are inside the palace walls." Kale's expression hardened instantly. "How many?" "Hundreds." The hall went deadly quiet. Ashbourne was no longer facing scattered corruption. This was invasion, and someone had planned it carefully. Veya. Kyle realized it instantly. The council had never intended to contain the darkness tonight. They intended to weaponize panic, execute Alara publicly, and seize control while the kingdom burned. But the corruption spread faster than expected. Now, everyone was losing control. Alara looked toward the palace windows with growing horror. "They're coming here." Kyle looked at her sharply. "How do you know?" Her voice trembled. "Because they can feel him waking." The broken chain beneath the judgment circle rattled once more. Then the ancient voice spoke again. Only this time, everyone heard it. "My queen." The throne hall froze. Ilara went completely still, and every eye in Ashbourne turned toward her. No one moved after the voice spoke. "My queen." The words lingered in the throne hall, long after the sound itself faded, clinging to the stone like smoke after fire. Even the storm outside seemed to recoil from them. Snow hammered against the shattered windows. Black flames trembled in the torches lining the walls. And at the center of the hall, beneath the ruined judgment circle, the broken chain slowly dragged itself another inch across the floor. Alara stared downward at it as though she could no longer feel her own body. Queen, not vessel, not monster, not curse. The difference hit her harder than terror. Kale saw it, immediately. For 15 years she had lived as a thing used by others. A prison, a weapon, a sacrifice waiting for permission to die. No one had ever spoken to her like she belonged to anything except pain. Now something ancient buried beneath the kingdom had called her queen. And somehow, that frightened her more than chains ever had. Soren found his voice first. "This is madness." No one disagreed. The soldiers backed farther from Alara instinctively. Reese remained near Kyle, sword drawn, though even he looked shaken by what they had just heard. Celine stood frozen near the ruined circle, her lips moving silently, as if reciting prayers she no longer believed would work. Kyle stepped slowly toward Alara. The moment he moved, several guards tensed again. Goes. They feared her already, not because she had attacked them, because power attached itself to her naturally now, and everyone in the hall could feel it. "Ilara," Kale said quietly. She looked up slowly. There was something terrible in her eyes now. Not corruption. Grief. "What if he's right?" she whispered. Kyle frowned slightly. "About what?" "That I belong to this." The words shattered through him unexpectedly. Because beneath the fear, beneath the curse, beneath the impossible magic and ancient voices, she still sounded like a girl trying desperately to understand why she had suffered her entire life. Kyle crossed the remaining distance between them. "You belong to yourself," he said firmly. Her breath caught. For one dangerous heartbeat, the hall disappeared around them. No throne, no court, no corruption. Only the look in her eyes when someone finally spoke to her like she was human. Then screams echoed from the palace corridors beyond the hall. Reality returned violently. Reese spun toward the doors. "They're inside." Almost immediately, pounding footsteps thundered through the outer corridors. Guards shouted. Wolves snarled. Somewhere nearby, Glass shattered, followed by human screaming cut abruptly short. The corrupted had breached the palace. Kale's instincts sharpened instantly. Protect the throne. Protect the city. Protect her. The third command drowned out the others frighteningly fast. "Reese," Kale ordered, "seal the inner gates. No one enters this hall without my command." The captain nodded immediately and barked orders to the remaining guards. Soren stepped forward. "Your Majesty, if the palace falls, it won't. That confidence is dangerous right now." Kael's gaze hardened. "And panic is treason." Before Soren could answer, Ilara suddenly grabbed Kael's arm hard enough to make him turn. Her face had gone pale again. "They're close." "What?" "The corrupted." Her gray eyes unfocused slightly. "I can hear them." Cold slid through him. Not ordinary hearing. The curse. The connection spreading between her and the corruption infecting the city. "How many?" Kael asked quietly. Fear flickered across her face. "Too many." The torches exploded. Black fire burst violently outward across the hall as the throne room doors slammed open from the outside. Bodies crashed through them, palace guards torn apart by claw marks and blackened veins spreading across their skin. Then the corrupted entered. They moved like wolves wearing human flesh incorrectly. Men and women twisted by darkness, their eyes glowing silver beneath black veins crawling across their throats and jaws. Some still wore servant uniforms. Others wore guard armor stained with blood. Their limbs bent wrong when they moved. Their mouths hung open too wide. And beneath the corruption, fragments of humanity still remained visible enough to make the horror worse. The servant girl Ilara recognized from the temple kitchens stumbled among them, her face twisted between agony and rage. "Ilara," she whispered weakly. Then the corruption overtook her again, and she lunged forward snarling. Kael moved instantly. His sword tore free in a flash of black steel as he intercepted the attack before it reached Ilara. The corrupted woman slammed into him with unnatural strength, claws ripping through his sleeve. Reese and the remaining guards surged forward. The throne hall erupted into violence. Steel clashed against claws. Wolves partially shifted in combat fury. Corrupted servants hurled themselves at soldiers with suicidal aggression, while black roots burst through cracks beneath the floor to drag screaming bodies into darkness. Ilara stood frozen near the throne dais. Not from fear, recognition. She knew some of them. People who had fed her, ignored her, passed her in temple halls without meeting her eyes. Now they were monsters, and the darkness inside her recognized them like family. One of the corrupted guards broke through the fighting and charged directly toward her. Kael saw it too late. Ilara. The corrupted man lunged with claws extended and stopped instantly inches from her throat. The hall froze. The corrupted guard trembled violently, silver eyes locked onto Ilara's face. Then slowly, he bowed. Not gracefully, not willingly, instinctively. One by one, the other corrupted began slowing across the throne hall. The fighting faltered. Black-veined faces turned toward Ilara simultaneously, and then every corrupted creature in the room lowered itself before her. Silence crashed through the hall. Blood dripped across the stone floor. Reese stared in disbelief. Soren looked horrified. Kael's pulse hammered against his ribs, because this was worse than violence. This was allegiance. Ilara backed away, shaking. No. The corrupted remained kneeling, waiting. The servant woman from the kitchens lifted her ruined face weakly toward Ilara. "It hurts," she whispered. The words broke something inside her. Ilara dropped to her knees beside the woman instantly despite the danger. Kael moved toward her immediately. Careful. But Ilara ignored him. The woman convulsed violently beneath the corruption spreading across her veins. Black blood stained her lips. Her human voice struggled against the beast, trying to consume it. "Ilara," she whispered again. "Please." Tears filled Ilara's eyes. She knew that tone, begging for pain to stop. She had spent half her life using it herself. "What do I do?" she whispered helplessly toward Kael. The Alpha King had faced war, assassination attempts, rebellions, famine, Nothing prepared him for the look on her face now. Not fear of death, fear of failing someone else. Suddenly, the woman screamed. The corruption surged violently beneath her skin. Ilara reacted instinctively. She grabbed the woman's face with both hands. The throne hall exploded with silver light. Everyone staggered backward. Darkness poured violently from the corrupted woman's body into Ilara's hands like smoke dragged by a storm. The woman convulsed once, then collapsed unconscious against the floor. Human again. The hall went dead, silent. Ilara gasped sharply as black veins spread instantly across her own arms. Kale crossed the distance immediately and caught her before she fell. The moment he touched her, the darkness recoiled. Actually recoiled. Silver light rippled beneath his skin where their bodies met. The black veins faded slowly from Ilara's arms, as if his presence itself pushed the corruption back. The entire hall saw it happen. Mate. Not ordinary. Something older. Something tied to the curse itself. Reese lowered his sword slowly. Gods. Celine looked like she might collapse, because she finally understood. The vessels had never been created merely to contain darkness. They had once ruled it. Ilara, Kyle said quietly, steadying her against him. Look at me. Her eyes lifted slowly, terrified. I took it from her. Yes. What if I can't stop? His hand tightened gently against her waist before he realized what he was doing. You will. You don't know that. No, he admitted softly. But I know you. The words stunned her into silence, because no one had ever said them before. No one had ever wanted to. Then suddenly, the palace trembled again. Hard. A deafening crack echoed beneath the throne hall. The broken floor split wider beneath the judgment circle, as ancient black roots erupted upward violently through the stone. Massive iron chains snapped loose one after another beneath the palace foundations with sounds like mountains breaking apart. And from the darkness below, a staircase began rising. Ancient black stone pushed upward through the shattered floor in slow grinding movements, roots curling around the steps like living veins. Cold air flooded into the throne hall, carrying the scent of wet earth, ash, and something impossibly old. The staircase descended deep beneath the palace, into darkness. Every corrupted creature in the hall lowered itself farther toward the opening, like worshippers before an altar. Then the voice rose upward again, closer now, varm, male, and heartbreakingly human. Ilara. Her breath caught instantly. Not because she feared the voice, because it sounded lonely. Kyle saw the reaction immediately. Guts, whatever waited below, was reaching her emotionally now. The ancient voice continued softly. They lied to you for so long. Ilara stared toward the darkness beneath the staircase. Kyle stepped protectively in front of her. The voice laughed quietly. You wear the fear of dead men, little king. Kale's expression hardened. Show yourself. Not yet. The black flames throughout the throne hall dimmed lower. I have slept beneath your kingdom for 800 years. The voice said calmly. I would rather look upon my queen with my own eyes. The hall went deathly still. Ilara shook her head weakly. I'm not your queen. Silence followed. Then, yes, the voice whispered gently. You are. Something inside Ilara broke. Kale felt it immediately through the bond. Not corruption. Loneliness. Answering loneliness. 15 years chained beneath temples. 800 years buried beneath stone. Gods. The realization chilled him. The first king was not simply trying to escape. He believed Ilara belonged to him because she was the first person to hear him after centuries of isolation. Ilara, Kale said sharply, forcing her attention back to him. Do not listen to him. Her gray eyes met his. Pain moved through them. He sounds. She stopped herself. Kyle already understood the word she refused to say. Alone. The same way she had sounded beside the forest stream at dawn. The same way she looked every time someone expected her to die quietly for the kingdom's comfort. The voice beneath the palace laughed softly again. You understand now, don't you? It murmured toward her. What it means to survive while everyone else calls you a curse. Kyle's wolf snarled violently, because the thing below was right, and that made it dangerous beyond measure. The roots surrounding the staircase twisted upward slowly like beckoning hands. "Come below," the first king whispered, "and I will tell you why they truly marked you." The staircase waited beneath the shattered throne hall like an open grave. Black roots coiled around the ancient steps, pulsing faintly with silver light beneath the bark, as though blood still flowed through them. Cold air rose endlessly from below, carrying the scent of old stone, wet earth, ash, and something stranger beneath it all. Moonflowers. Ilara recognized the smell instantly. Her mother used to braid moonflowers into her hair when she was small, before the fire, before the temple, before she learned her life belonged more to a kingdom than to herself. The memory hit so suddenly it nearly stole her breath. Kale noticed immediately. His hand remained wrapped firmly around her wrist, grounding her against the pull coming from below. Through the bond, she could feel his wolf pacing violently beneath his skin, protective, suspicious, afraid. Not of her, Fahia. The realization still felt unreal. The throne hall remained frozen around them. Corrupted creatures knelt silently throughout the chamber, their silver eyes lowered toward the staircase like worshippers before an altar. Reese stood near the broken doors with blood on his blade and disbelief written across his face. Soren looked trapped between fear and loyalty, so severe it bordered on agony. And Mother Celine, the old priestess, looked haunted, not by the first king, by recognition. KL saw it too. "You know what's down there?" Celine swallowed hard. "Yes." "Then speak." Her pale eyes drifted toward the staircase slowly. The original throne chamber. Cold spread through the hall. Kyle frowned. "Ashbourne already has a throne chamber." "No," Celine whispered. "It has a replacement." The black roots beneath the staircase tightened. Far below them, something ancient listened. The first kings of the north did not rule from this palace. Celine continued quietly. This castle was built afterward, above the ruins of the old kingdom. Shame thickened her voice. Above him, Ilara stared toward the darkness below. He was buried alive. The priestess closed her eyes briefly. Silence crashed through the hall. Goats. Not sealed. Not imprisoned. Buried. Kael felt anger move through him again. Old and sharp and dangerous. Ashbourne's history had always glorified the noble founders who united the fractured packs after defeating a tyrant corrupted by forbidden moon magic. But history was written by survivors. And suddenly, he wondered how much of it had been true at all. The voice below spoke softly again. They feared what they could not control. The torches dimmed lower. They poisoned the wolves against me, burned my queen, murdered my bloodline. The ancient voice remained calm, but grief lived beneath every word. Then they chained me beneath the roots and taught future kings to call themselves righteous. Kael's jaw tightened. "You expect me to trust the words of a creature imprisoned for 8 centuries? A soft laugh echoed upward. "No." The roots shifted slowly. "I expect you to recognize yourself in them." The words struck harder than they should have. Kael went still, because part of him did recognize it. The council hiding truths behind ritual. The throne weakening, while nobles manipulated fear. The kingdom rotting beneath beautiful lies. Gods, how much of Ashbourne's history was built on betrayal? "Ilara," the first king whispered gently. "Come below." Kael tightened his grip on her wrist immediately. "No." The response came from both of them at once. Ilara blinked in surprise. So did he. For one brief moment, something almost dangerously soft flickered between them, despite the chaos surrounding the throne hall. Then another scream echoed through the palace corridors outside. Reality returned instantly. Rhys moved toward the shattered doors again. Your Majesty, we're losing the outer halls. Kyle cursed softly beneath his breath. The corruption was still spreading, and every minute wasted here cost more lives. Ilara, he said quietly, turning fully toward her. Can you stop the corrupted? Her face tightened with guilt instantly. I don't know. Could you try? She looked toward the kneeling creatures throughout the hall. At the servant woman she had healed. At the black veins still pulsing beneath corrupted skin. Fear crossed her expression. Every time I touch the darkness, she whispered, it leaves something behind. Kale frowned. What kind of something? She hesitated. Then finally, memories. The hall went still. When I healed her, Ilara said softly, glancing toward the unconscious kitchen servant. I saw things. Her voice trembled faintly. Fear, hunger, rage. She swallowed hard. The corruption doesn't erase people completely. It traps them beneath it. Celine looked horrified. That should not be possible. Ilara laughed weakly. That seems to happen around me often, despite everything. Despite the blood and broken stone and ancient kings whispering from beneath the earth. Kale nearly smiled. Gots. Even exhausted and terrified, she still reached for sharp humor before surrender. The realization warmed something dangerous inside him. Mate. The bond tightened again. Ilara looked away immediately, as though she felt it too strongly. Of course she did. The problem was no longer whether the bond existed. The problem was what happened if the kingdom discovered how much it mattered to him already. Too late for that now. Soren suddenly stepped forward again, visibly struggling against himself. Your Majesty. Kale turned sharply. The captain lowered his sword slowly. I still believe the council is wrong about some things, he admitted carefully. But if the corruption spreads through the capital before dawn, he looked toward Ilara. Thousands could die. Ilara flinched. Kael's expression hardened instantly. Choose your next words carefully. Soren met his gaze directly, despite the danger. I am. Silence stretched tightly between them. Then, unexpectedly, Ilara spoke first. He's right. Kael turned toward her sharply. No, but she continued quietly. If I can take the corruption back into myself, maybe the city survives. And what happens to you? Her silence answered him. Rage flared instantly beneath his ribs. Not at her. At the fact she spoke about destroying herself with such calm acceptance. You do not get to throw your life away because this kingdom failed you. He snapped. The words hit harder than he intended. Ilara stared at him. Not hurt. Stunned. Because no one had ever sounded angry about the possibility of losing her before. Kael realized too late how much emotion had slipped into his voice. The bond surged painfully between them. Gods. Rhys discreetly looked away. Even Soren understood now. The Alpha King was already far too attached to the cursed girl. Ilara, Kael said more quietly. Listen to me carefully. He stepped closer. You are not responsible for every evil buried beneath Ashbourne. Her gray eyes glistened faintly. I know that here, she whispered, touching her temple weakly. But the curse. Her hand drifted toward the cracked mark beneath her collarbone. The curse makes everything feel like mine. The first king spoke again, softly from below. Because they taught you guilt before they taught you your own name. The throne hall fell silent. Ilara's breathing caught sharply. Kael hated that the voice understood her. Hated it because he understood her too. The roots surrounding the staircase shifted once more. You deserve the truth, the ancient king murmured. Come below, little queen. See what they buried. Celine suddenly moved forward. No. Everyone turned toward her. The priestess looked more frightened now than at any point since the palace began shaking. You cannot let him reach her fully, she said urgently toward Kael. If the old bond awakens completely. What bond? Kael demanded. Celine hesitated too long. Ilara, Kael said quietly without looking away from the priestess. What aren't they telling us? But Celine answered first. The vessels were created from his bloodline. Silence crashed through the hall. Ilara stared at her in shock. What? Celine's voice trembled. After the first king was imprisoned, traces of his queen's moon magic remained within their descendants. Shame thickened every word. The early councils discovered the bloodline could contain corruption more effectively than ordinary humans. Ilara's face drained of color. No. Kyle felt ice spread through his chest. The priestess looked at Ilara with unbearable guilt. You were never chosen randomly. Gods. The room tilted around her. Ilara stepped backward slowly. No. The cracked moon mark, Celine whispered. Only the old royal bloodline can survive it. Memories exploded through Ilara's mind violently. Her mother hiding old symbols beneath floorboards. The moonflower braids. A lullaby about wolves kneeling before a queen crowned in silver fire. Her father whispering, "Run, if they ever discover what you are." Tears filled her eyes instantly. They knew, she whispered. Celine could not deny it. They killed my village because they knew. No answer came. Because it was true. The fire. The masked men. The temple. None of it had been random. Ashbourne had slaughtered her family to reclaim a bloodline they needed buried alive. Something inside Ilara cracked open completely. The throne hall darkened instantly. The roots across the floor twisted violently. The corrupted throughout the chamber lowered themselves even farther as silver light burst beneath Ilara's skin. Kyle moved toward her immediately. Ilara. She looked at him, and for the first time since he met her, he saw fury. Not monstrous fury. Human fury. 15 years of pain suddenly finding a target. They murdered them, she whispered. The torches exploded outward. Black wind ripped through the throne hall hard enough to shatter the remaining windows. The first king's voice rose beneath the palace. Not commanding. Mourning. You were never the curse, little queen. The darkness around Ilara surged violently. Kael grabbed her shoulders instantly. Ilara, look at me. Silver tears streamed down her face. They took everything. I know. No, she choked out. You don't. And suddenly memories slammed through the mating bond between them. Kael saw it all. A little girl dragged screaming through burning streets. A mother torn apart by wolves wearing royal armor. Chains locked around tiny wrists. Temple priests forcing corruption into a child, while she begged for someone to make it stop. Loneliness so absolute it felt endless. Kael staggered beneath the force of it. Guts. Goes. His chest felt like it was splitting open. Ilara gasped sharply as the accidental connection snapped apart. Too late. He had seen every horrifying piece of it. Kyle looked at her with something beyond pity now. Something roar. Protective rage so violent it nearly drowned him. The throne hall trembled beneath the force of his wolf answering it. No wonder she was tired. No wonder she wanted to die sometimes. Ashbourne had spent 15 years carving pieces out of her soul and calling it duty. Ilara, he said softly, voice roughened beyond recognition. Listen to me. She could barely meet his eyes now, not after he had seen the worst parts of her. But Kyle lifted one hand carefully to her face anyway. Gentle. So gentle it nearly broke her. What they did to you, he whispered, was unforgivable. Something inside her shattered completely then. Not from pain, from being believed. She started crying, soundlessly, and the entire throne hall watched the Alpha King of Ashbourne wipe tears from the face of the girl his kingdom had turned into a monster. Then the roots beneath the staircase suddenly recoiled, violently. The first king's voice changed instantly. Sharp, dangerous. They're coming. Kyle turned toward the palace doors immediately. Too late. A deafening explosion tore through the outer walls of the throne hall as black fire erupted inward. Soldiers screamed. Stone shattered. And through the smoke stepped Lord Vere, surrounded by dozens of fully corrupted royal guards, whose silver eyes burned like moonlight in dead flesh. The council lord smiled coldly through the chaos. Well, he said softly, now everyone finally knows what she is. Black smoke rolled through the ruined throne hall as Lord Vere stepped across shattered stone like a man entering a ceremony he had prepared for years. The corrupted guards surrounding him no longer resembled human soldiers completely. Their armor hung twisted across warped bodies, streaked with black veins and silver light pulsing beneath skin stretched too tightly over bone. Some still carried royal insignias across their chests. Others bled openly from eyes and mouths without seeming to notice. Yet, unlike the corrupted civilians in the city, these creatures moved with terrifying discipline. Controlled. Engineered. Kyle realized it instantly. Vare had not merely experimented with corruption. He had built an army from it. The Council Lord's pale gaze swept calmly across the throne hall before settling on Ilara. Not fearful. Triumphant. "There you are," he murmured softly. Ilara stiffened beside KL immediately. The reaction did not look like fear of a political enemy. It looked older. Personal. Kyle noticed. Of course he noticed. "You know him," he said quietly. Ilara's face went pale. Vare smiled faintly. "I should hope so. I selected her myself." Silence crashed through the hall. Kyle's wolf exploded with fury beneath his skin. "What did you say?" Vare folded his gloved hands behind his back, almost casually. The temple always struggled to find children strong enough to survive the vessel rituals. Most broke apart within weeks. His gaze lingered on Ilara. But her bloodline showed unusual resilience. Ilara looked physically ill. "You burned my village." Vare tilted his head slightly. "Your village carried forbidden blood tied directly to the old royal line. Allowing it to spread would have endangered the stability of Ashbourne. You murdered children. I preserved a kingdom." The words echoed through the hall with horrifying sincerity. Not cruelty. Conviction. That made him monstrous. KL descended the dais slowly, sword still drawn at his side. "You fed corruption into your own people." "Yes." No hesitation. No denial. Reese cursed softly under his breath. Vare glanced toward the corrupted soldiers surrounding him. "Weak kingdoms die, Your Majesty. The northern packs were already fracturing beneath your father's reign. Rival alphas circled constantly. Famine spread through the outer territories. The throne needed fear again." KL's expression darkened into something lethal. "So you created monsters. I created obedience." The corrupted guards snarled softly behind him, like wolves responding to command. Ghosts. Vare truly believed this. Every sacrifice. Every death. Every child buried beneath temple rituals. Necessary. Your wolf was dying. Vare continued calmly toward Kale. "The court already whispered about replacing you before winter ended." His pale eyes sharpened. "But corruption strengthens instinct. Aggression. Dominance. Survival." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Imagine an army incapable of fear." Ilara stared at him in horror. "The villages. Tests." The word landed like a blade across the hall. Kale's grip tightened around his sword hard enough to creak leather. "You slaughtered your own people to test control. Better villages than capitals." The throne hall went deathly silent. Even the corrupted creatures kneeling throughout the chamber seemed to recoil slightly from the coldness in his voice. Vare looked toward Ilara again, but then our vessel became unstable. His expression sharpened. "You were never meant to awaken this much." Ilara shook faintly beside Kyle. For years she had blamed herself for every death, every scream, every full moon soaked in blood. Now the truth stood in front of her, smiling politely through the ruins of Ashbourne. Someone else had been steering the darkness all along. Kale felt rage, radiating through the bond between them. Wrath. Burning. Human. Good. She deserved anger. "Ilara," Vare said softly, almost regretfully, "if you had simply continued obeying, none of this would have happened." Something changed in her face then. Not fear. Not grief. Understanding. For the first time in 15 years, she finally saw the shape of the cage built around her life. And suddenly she realized something terrifying. The council never feared the darkness. They feared losing control of it. The cracked moon mark beneath her collarbone burned violently. The roots throughout the throne hall twisted in response. Vare noticed instantly. "There it is," he whispered. The old blood waking. Kale stepped protectively in front of her immediately. "You come no closer." The corrupted guards surged forward as one. Reese and the remaining palace soldiers raised their weapons instantly. The throne hall exploded into violence again. Corrupted soldiers slammed into Kael's guards with impossible strength. Black claws ripped through steel armor. Wolves partially shifted mid-combat. Blood sprayed across shattered stone beneath roaring black firelight. Kael met the first corrupted guard head-on. His sword tore clean through the creature's shoulder and chest in a spray of blackened blood. The body collapsed, twitching violently, before the corruption inside it dragged the corpse upright again. Goats. They barely felt pain anymore. Another guard lunged toward Alara from the side. She reacted instinctively. The darkness surged from her outstretched hand in a wave of silver-black smoke. The corrupted soldier froze instantly. Then slowly, the corruption peeled itself out of his body like living shadow. The man collapsed unconscious to the floor human again. Alara staggered. The darkness flowed into her arms again. Kael killed another attacker and reached her side immediately. "Stop taking it into yourself. I can't leave them like this. You'll kill yourself." Her gray eyes met his through the chaos. "And if I don't?" Another scream echoed from the palace corridors outside. More corruption spreading. More people dying. Gods. Kael realized she was right. The throne hall had become a battlefield between impossible choices. Vare watched from the far side of the chamber almost calmly, while his corrupted soldiers fought around him. "You see the problem now, Your Majesty," he called over the chaos. "The vessel cannot survive without feeding, and the kingdom cannot survive if she does." Liar. Kael finally understood the deeper truth beneath all this. Vare needed Alara unstable, needed her feared. Because if the kingdom realized she could actually heal corruption instead of merely containing it, the council's centuries of lies would collapse overnight. "Alara," Kael shouted over the fighting. "Can you remove corruption completely?" She looked terrified by the question itself. "I don't know." Through. Another corrupted guard lunged toward them. Kael intercepted the attack, while Alara grabbed the soldier's arm instinctively. Darkness ripped violently out of the man's body again, stronger this time, writhing between her fingers like living smoke. The soldier collapsed. Human. Alive. The darkness surged into Alara, then stopped. The entire throne hall froze. Because the corruption did not disappear into her body this time. It hovered around her hands. Waiting. Obeying. Alara stared at it in shock. Vare's expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. "She's controlling it," Celine whispered. "Not containing. Controlling." The darkness twisted slowly around Alara's trembling hands like black moonlight caught in water. She looked horrified. Kael looked stunned. The first king's voice rose softly from beneath the palace. Yes. The roots throughout the throne hall erupted upward violently. Corrupted soldiers stumbled as black vines wrapped around their limbs, dragging many screaming beneath the cracked floor. Others dropped to one knee instinctively before Alara. Vare's composure finally cracked. "No." He stepped backward sharply. "This is impossible." Alara looked toward the darkness floating around her fingers. Then, toward the corrupted civilians kneeling throughout the hall. Then toward the Cisname burning beyond the shattered windows. A realization slowly formed across her face. The vessels had never been designed merely to imprison corruption. They had been designed to command it. The old bloodline had not feared darkness. It had ruled it. Vare saw the understanding appear in her eyes, and panicked. Kill her. The remaining corrupted guards surged toward Alara, all at once. Kael roared. "Not human. Voif." The sound shook the entire throne hall, and for the first time in months, he shifted fully. Black fur exploded across his body in a violent surge of power. Bones snapped and reformed beneath moonlight flooding through shattered windows. Massive claws tore through the stone floor as the Alpha King transformed completely into his wolf form. The throne hall froze. Gods. Reese stared openly in shock, because Kael had not fully shifted in nearly a year. The beast that emerged was enormous, black-furred and battle-scarred with glowing gold eyes burning beneath storm-dark fur. Pure alpha power flooded the chamber hard enough to force even rival wolves into submission. And the moment the transformed king placed himself protectively in front of Ilara, the mating bond snapped, fully awake. The entire palace felt it. A pulse of ancient magic exploded outward through Ashbourne like a heartbeat. Wolves throughout the city howled instantly. The black roots beneath the throne hall bloomed with silver flowers. And deep below the palace, the first king laughed softly. Not cruelly, proudly. Mate. The word thundered through Ilara's soul. She staggered slightly beneath the force of it. Kael's massive wolf stood over her protectively, teeth bared toward Vair's advancing soldiers while golden eyes remained fixed partly on her. Not possession. Promise. The corrupted guards hesitated instinctively. Even darkness recognized an alpha, protecting his mate. Vair's face twisted with fury. "You fool," he hissed toward Kael. "Do you understand what she is?" Kael's wolf snarled. The sound shook dust from the ceiling. Yes, the answer came not from his mouth, but directly into the minds of everyone in the throne hall, through the Alpha Bond itself. "And I dare anyone here to touch her." Terror swept visibly through the surviving soldiers. Even Soren stepped backward. Guts. Kael had publicly claimed her. Not as prisoner, not as weapon, as mate. The kingdom would never recover quietly from this. Vair understood it too, which meant he had run out of political moves. Now, only desperation remained. The council lord's expression hardened suddenly. Then he reached beneath his robes and drew a silver dagger carved with ancient moon symbols. Celine gasped in horror. No, too late. Vair plunged the dagger into his own chest. The throne hall erupted in screams. Black corruption exploded outward from the wound like liquid shadow as Vair's body convulsed violently. Silver light burned beneath his skin. Bones cracked. His spine twisted unnaturally backward, while black roots burst through the floor and wrapped around him like welcoming hands. The corruption had never merely strengthened him. He had infected himself deliberately. "You wanted a monster?" Vair screamed as his body transformed grotesquely beneath the spreading darkness. "Then watch your kingdom drown beneath one." His human form split apart. Massive claws tore through flesh. Black, antler-like horns erupted from his skull, while silver eyes burned violently through the corruption consuming him. The throne hall shook beneath the force of his transformation as he expanded into something enormous and horrifyingly unstable. Not wolf, not human, something worse. Ilara stared in horror. He gave himself too much. Vair roared. The sound shattered the remaining throne hall windows outward across the snowy city below. And somewhere beneath the palace, the chains finally broke completely. The final chain broke beneath Ashbourne, with a sound like the mountain itself splitting open. Every torch in the throne hall extinguished simultaneously. Darkness swallowed the palace. Then, silver moonlight exploded upward from the abyss beneath the shattered floor. The ancient staircase cracked apart as roots burst violently through the stone, tearing the throne hall open from beneath. Nobles screamed in distant corridors. Bells across the city rang wildly, before dying one by one beneath the growing roar rising from underground. And in the center of the collapsing hall, Lord Vair finished transforming. The thing that emerged barely resembled a man anymore. Blackened flesh stretched grotesquely over a monstrous wolf-like frame, large enough to tower above the throne dais. Twisted antlers erupted from his skull like dead branches dripping silver corruption. Clawed limbs tore through stone. His mouth split too wide when he roared, revealing rows of broken silver teeth. But worst of all, he still had human eyes. Mad, terrified, convinced he was right. "You doomed us!" The creature screamed toward Kael and Ilara as black corruption poured endlessly from its body. "The darkness cannot be ruled." The throne hall shook harder. Outside, corrupted citizens across Ashbourne suddenly screamed in unison. Ilara gasped sharply. Kael's wolf immediately moved beside her protectively. She could feel it, all of it, every infected mind in the city, every heartbeat drowning beneath corruption. And underneath them, something ancient waking completely beneath the roots of the kingdom. The first king, The black roots erupting through the palace twisted toward Ilara, instinctively like flowers reaching toward sunlight. Not attacking. Welcoming. Gods. She understood now. The corruption answered her, because it recognized the old bloodline buried inside her soul. The bloodline Ashbourne tried to erase. Ilara. Kael's voice tore through the chaos. She looked up sharply. His massive wolf stood between her and Vair's monstrous form, golden eyes fixed entirely on her despite the collapsing throne hall around them. Trust me. The words moved through the mating bond without speech. Not command. Faith. And suddenly Ilara realized something terrifying. No one had ever trusted her before. Not the temple. Not the kingdom. Not herself. But Kael did. The realization nearly broke her. Vaya. Lunget. The monstrous council lord crashed across the throne hall with enough force to shatter pillars, as Kael met him head-on in a violent explosion of claws and black fur. The impact shook the palace foundations. Corruption sprayed across the stone floor like burning oil, while the Alpha King tore into the creature with terrifying fury. But Vair no longer felt pain. Black roots fed directly into his transformed body from beneath the palace floor. He roared wildly and slammed Kael through the remains of the throne dais hard enough to crack marble apart. Ilara, Rhys shouted desperately from across the hall. Do something. She froze. Not from fear of Vair, from fear of herself. The darkness still floated around her hands. Waiting. Obeying. One wrong movement, and she could lose control, completely. Then Vair grabbed Kael by the throat and hurled him through a collapsing stone column. The sound of bone-striking stone shattered something inside her. Enough. The silver-black corruption surrounding Ilara exploded outward violently. The throne hall froze. Every root, every corrupted creature, every shadow, stopped moving instantly. Vair turned slowly toward her, and for the first time, since his transformation, fear entered his monstrous face. Ilara rose. Moonlight flooded through the destroyed ceiling above her, silver fire rippling beneath her skin, while the cracked crescent mark burned like a living star against her chest. The darkness circled her body. Not like corruption anymore, like a crown. The corrupted throughout the hall lowered themselves instinctively, not because they were forced, because they recognized her. The old bloodline had returned. Kael pulled himself upright from the shattered stone, golden eyes fixed on her in stunned silence. Not afraid. Never afraid. Gods. That mattered more than she could survive. Ilara, Vair snarled, trying to regain control of the corruption flowing through him. You don't understand what you're becoming. For the first time, she answered without trembling. Yes, she said softly. I do. The darkness surged. Vair screamed as the corruption inside his monstrous body suddenly stopped obeying him. His claws convulsed violently. Black veins spread across his face. The roots feeding him twisted backward like snakes retreating from fire. No. Ilara lifted one shaking hand toward him, and every corrupted root inside the throne hall obeyed her command. The roots erupted upward around Vair instantly. The monstrous council lord roared in fury as black vines wrapped around his limbs, throat, antlers, and chest, dragging him downward toward the cracked abyss beneath the palace. You think they'll love you now? He screamed at her desperately. After they see what you are? The words hit harder than claws, because part of her still feared he was right. Ilara hesitated, just slightly, and Vair felt it. The monster ripped one arm free violently and lunged straight toward her with claws outstretched. Too fast. Too close. Kael moved before thought. His wolf slammed into Vair mid-lunge hard enough to shake the throne hall foundations. Black claws ripped through fur and flesh as the two monstrous forms crashed across shattered stone together. Kael roared in pain. Ilara's heart stopped. Vair's claws had torn deep across Kael's side. Black corruption spread instantly through the wound. No. The scream ripped out of her before she realized it. Kael staggered. The corruption moved fast through alpha blood. Too fast. Vair laughed wildly through blood and roots tightening around him. Watch him rot beside you. The throne hall darkened violently. Alara dropped beside Kale immediately, as his wolf convulsed against the spreading corruption. His golden eyes found hers, still calm, still trusting her. Even now. Don't, he rasped, weakly through the bond. Not for me. Tears burned instantly down her face. Gods. He still thought she would destroy herself trying to save him, and maybe she would. But she finally understood something. The darkness did not answer her, because she was broken. It answered because she was strong enough to survive it. The realization crashed through her like sunrise breaking over winter mountains. All those years she believed herself empty, cursed, wrong. But the truth was worse, and somehow more beautiful. She had endured what should have killed anyone else. Not because she was monstrous, because she was meant to carry more than ordinary people ever could. Alara, Kael whispered weakly, corruption spreading beneath his fur. She touched his face gently, then looked toward the abyss beneath the throne hall, toward the ancient king waiting below. And finally, she understood what he truly wanted. Not escape. Release. The first king had spent 8 centuries chained beneath Ashbourne, carrying corruption too vast for death itself to claim. Just like her. Loneliness answered loneliness. Not romance. Recognition. Alara. The ancient voice rose softly beneath the palace. Little queen. She stood slowly. Kael's wolf tried weakly to rise after her despite the corruption poisoning his blood. Alara. Her gray eyes met his one last time, and he saw the decision there. Instantly. No. Panic slammed through the mating bond hard enough to stagger both of them. She stepped toward the abyss anyway, because she finally knew how to stop all of it. The corruption. The first king. The spreading darkness infecting Ashbourne. The vessel needed to return to the source. Alara, stop. Kael forced himself upright despite the corruption ripping through his body. He shifted partially back into human form mid-motion, blood pouring down his side as he stumbled after her desperately. You don't get to leave me too. The words shattered her. She turned sharply. Kael stood barely conscious amid the collapsing throne hall, black corruption spreading across his chest while golden eyes burned with raw desperation. Not kingly restraint. Not alpha command. Love. Good. He loved her. The realization broke through every wall inside her all at once. No one had ever chosen her over the kingdom before. No one. You said I belong to myself, she whispered shakily. You do. Then let this be my choice. No. He crossed the distance between them despite the pain, gripping her wrist hard enough to tremble. I am done watching people sacrifice you for this kingdom. Tears streamed silently down her face. Kael, you think I care about the throne anymore? His voice cracked with fury and grief. Let Ashbourne burn before I let them bury you beneath it too. The mating bond roared violently between them. Soul deep. Ancien. Real. The first king spoke softly from below. She is not yours to chain, little king. Kael's expression turned murderous. She is not yours at all. Silence followed. Then, something unexpected happened. The ancient king laughed. Not cruelly, warmly, almost sadly. At last, the voice whispered. A king worthy of her. The roots throughout the throne hall suddenly stilled. Vare screamed beneath them as the corruption consuming his body began ripping him apart from the inside. Black veins burst violently across his monstrous form while silver light tore through his chest. No. The first king's voice rolled upward one final time. You carried my grief long enough, child. Alara froze. The corruption surrounding her body began lifting away. Not violently, gently, like smoke carried upward by wind. The darkness, flooding Ashbourne, shifted instantly. Every corrupted citizen throughout the city collapsed unconscious as black smoke poured from their bodies toward the palace, toward the abyss beneath it. Toward him. The first king was taking it back. All of it. The roots trembled violently throughout the throne hall. And suddenly Alara understood. He had never been trying to escape. He had been trying to wake long enough to release her. The realization hit too late. Wait. Silver moonlight erupted upward from the abyss. The entire palace shook violently as the roots beneath Ashbourne began collapsing inward. Vare's monstrous body disintegrated, screaming into black ash. The corruption pouring from Kael's wound ripped free instantly, dragged downward into the light below. And, from the depths beneath the throne hall, a man finally emerged. Not monstrous, not corrupted. A tall figure crowned in silver-black moonfire, dressed in ancient royal armor cracked by centuries of imprisonment. Dark hair framed a scarred but human face. Silver eyes filled with unbearable exhaustion, lifted slowly toward Alara, the first king, and when he looked at her, he smiled like a father, seeing his daughter survive a war. "So much pain," he whispered softly. Alara could barely breathe. The ancient king looked toward Kael next. "You chose well." Then his gaze drifted upward through the ruined palace ceiling toward the storm-dark sky above Ashbourne. "The kingdom is yours now." The roots began crumbling. The palace shook harder. Kael realized instantly what was happening. The seal was collapsing permanently, and the first king was dying with it. The ancient ruler looked back toward Alara one final time. "Live differently than we did." Then moonlight consumed him. The abyss beneath the throne hall collapsed inward in a deafening explosion of silver fire and black ash. Kael grabbed Alara just before the floor gave way beneath them both. The world vanished into light. When dawn finally rose over Ashbourne, the corruption was gone. The black roots had withered into silver ash, scattered across the palace ruins. The corrupted citizens woke weak but human. Wolves throughout the kingdom fell silent, beneath a strange peace none of them could explain. And in the center of the ruined throne hall, the nobles of Ashbourne gathered around the girl they once called Monster. Alara stood beside Kael, beneath the broken remains of the throne, wrapped in his black cloak while morning sunlight spilled through the destroyed ceiling above them. No chains, no fear. The court stared at her differently now, not because they suddenly became good people, because they finally understood who had saved them. Rhys stepped forward first, then Kneat. One by one, the wolves of Ashbourne followed. Not to Kael, to her, the girl buried beneath a curse, the last daughter of the forgotten bloodline, the queen the kingdom tried to erase. Kael looked at her quietly as the hall filled with kneeling wolves. "You once asked what people would think if they saw you beside me." Alara's breath trembled softly. "And now?" Kael reached for her hand in front of the entire court. "Now they know exactly where you belong." She looked at the ruined kingdom around them, at the kneeling wolves, at the morning light finally touching stone once buried beneath centuries of lies. Then back at the king who had chosen her when the world demanded her death. And for the first time in her life, Alara Wren stopped feeling like something meant only to survive. She felt loved.